Hey everybody, and welcome to the Ready Steady Play podcast. You may know Ready Steady Play from YouTube, where we've done a ton of board game videos, but this is our first foray into the world of podcasting. This is, of course, more board game content, everything about board games. We're going to talk about the board games we've played, and in this very special first episode, we're going to talk about the board games we love. And when I say we, I am joined by Barry.
Hello.
And Barry's there he is. He's a regular contributor to the show, and he's been in many of the playthroughs. And if you all miss him from the show, then you can find him here on the podcast.
But I'll just be a disembodied head should this end up a video.
Well, there will be a video version of this on the YouTube channel. At the moment, it will just look like me talking to myself in a room.
Same as usual?
Get more... Yes, same as many of the live streams. But it may well develop into a more structured video format, depending on how this goes. But, of course, the intention really here is to go out onto all good podcast hosting formats. So you'll probably find this anywhere you find podcasts. But I did want to put it up on YouTube as well, because, of course, we've been doing videos on YouTube for almost 7 years now. Or, no, almost 8 years.
Time flies.
Time flies. And in those 8 years, we've played a lot of games. And before that, we played a lot of games as well. So in this special inaugural first episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the games that first got us into the hobby and brought us in. Now, I understand, Barry, that you've got a brief history about yourself as a gamer. So
a brief history of Barry. Just what everybody's been asking for all this time, no?
You asked for it, so you're getting it.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
So obviously I've been playing games a long time, in my 40s now, and grew up playing games, but standard deck card games, things like Rummy with my grandfather and family, and grew up with Snakes and Ladders and Ludo and a little bit of chess and those kind of things. But as I got a little bit older, sort of 7, 8, 9 type thing, ended up with different board games, and I was just thinking the other day, I had the original Thunder Road before the republish by Restoration Games that recently came out. I had a board game called Wildlife, where I learned about pachyderms and reptiles, being elephants and crocodiles and things like that. And of course Monopoly and the stuff that everybody kind of grows up with in a UK household, it seems. But then I got into HeroQuest. And from HeroQuest, Space Crusade, and then arguably into Warhammer from there, with detours around their board game offerings like Mighty Empires and stuff. But HeroQuest was definitely the first sort of hobby board game I got into as a child, so it'll be about 9, 10. So HeroQuest, currently from Hasbro, but at the time Milton Bradley published it in the UK as a small scale one versus all dungeon crawler. It's very swingy, there's not a lot of role playing, there's not a huge amount of variety in the box, but for the imagination of a 10-year-old boy and his friends, was great. Right, so players took on the role of an elf, a dwarf, a barbarian, or a wizard. So covered all the genders, and played against the evil wizard Morcar. Unless you were in North America, Mike, in which case you would be playing against Zargon. Don't know why they were named differently, but one of life's great mysteries. And I was pretty obsessed. Like, I got the expansions, I got the Witch King, Keller's Keep, Against the Ogre Horde. I tried to get the Sorcerer one, and there was a Dungeon Adventurers kit where you can make your own dungeons. And I would argue that was where, my love for game design and then development kind of came from. In addition to drawing platforming games for the Spectrum on graph paper. And eventually that led to graduating to Advanced HeroQuest, but I could never really figure that one out. It was a bit too advanced for my 11-year-old brain at the time. It wasn't particularly streamlined as far as games go. So I've not replayed HeroQuest since it's come out again, since the Hasbro Pulse relaunch. But I did play it 5-6 years ago at one of the pub meetups, and it didn't really hold up, right? It still works, it's just not that interesting. But thankfully, fans have done a lot of things over the interceding years, and it's getting a bit of a resurgence, and people are doing a lot more with it now. And that was kind of my very young youth going into my teens. As I said, I got into Warhammer a little bit, but still sticking with board games. I got into Twilight Creation Zombies. Have you ever played Zombies?
No, I don't think so.
Right, well, Zombies is a competitive tile-based roll and move, really. The goal is to escape a city overrun by zombies or kill enough zombies to be safe. It utilises cards and items along with health and equipment, and I'll stop describing it there in case you get the idea that it's actually any good. Early 20s or late teens, early 20s, me and my friends, we went all in on this, and there must be like 20 expansions now. I bought everything up to expansion like 13, 14, and we played it a ton. We'd organise nights to sit down and play it. But again, it's not very good, right? It's roll and move, you've got limited options, it's quite swingy with the dice, there's high variance effects. So, in addition to using the expansions to cover some of the cracks, which really only made the game longer, not really any better, I also spent some time coming up with rules for it and new ways to play. But maybe 10 years ago now I got rid of them all, and my printed off home rules I kept in one of the core boxes that I sent to the person that bought it from me, so I hope they're getting some of my design changes, getting use out of some of my design changes there as well. And then let's take it back to my adult life. So let's just go back 15 years time now. I'm living in London, and I go to a pub meetup, a Reddit meetup, a bunch of nerds that we are, and playing board games where I'm introduced to Dominion. What a game. What a game. Guess what else we play, Mike? Galaxy Trucker. What a riot. And then finally we play Steve Jackson's Munchkin. But it's a good laugh the first time you play it. So I'm a few pints in, because as I said, we're at the pub at this time and people are moving on, and it's still the middle of the afternoon, but people are just changing pubs, and we're in central London, and I kind of make my excuses and I slope off to Orc's Nest, which is a game shop in the middle of London, and what's proving to be a series of backing the wrong horse here, I pick up about 5 different core sets of Munchkin. Not Dominion, not Galaxy Trucker. I pick up Munchkin. And so again, for years, I spent years playing Munchkin with my flatmates and buying more Munchkin and more Munchkin, because the humour in Munchkin only really works the first time you see it, and the game itself's not amazing. It's card driven, you're trying to get to level 10, monsters are coming out, you're trying to defeat them to go up levels, but it's heavily take that, and everybody's trying to stop you. So the first person that looks like they're going to win, everybody's saved all their bad cards for, they all get burned, and then the second person that goes to the finish line almost wins by default. So again, not an amazing game to play. Sometimes it's funny, and if you're into the theme, but I should not have spent as much as I did.
I mean, I think we'll find that we've got actually an enormous number of commonalities there in our history, which I wasn't actually aware we had. But yeah, specifically with Munchkin, it's also one of those games where I found that nobody plays it the same way.
Really?
Like, nobody plays it correctly.
Well, I played a lot of it, so if I was playing it wrong, wasn't by choice. Oh, the worst rule of Munchkin is that the early versions said you were allowed to cheat if you could get away with it. And the people that took that rule seriously were the least fun people to play Munchkin with. But I guess people have house rules again because they're looking for something out of the game that the game's maybe not providing out of the box, the same way Hero Quest might not, or Zombies might not, or Munchkin might not. So it's only really in the last 10 years that I've started playing these more modern games. gone to various meetups, playtest meetups, made some very bad games. I've now played over 1,000 hobby board games or modern board games. But I'd argue it's only the last couple of years I've really started to get a proper grip on what I like and not get caught up in fads. Because again, backing things that I don't like anymore, I went all in on seasons 1 to 3 of Zombicide. Right, which the newer versions do something a bit more advanced, a bit more streamlined, but the early versions were a little rougher. And just buying games for the sake of buying games and cheap games, just getting into the hobby. So I think from my experience, one piece of advice I'd give to people is to play more, buy less. The amount of money I would have saved just by knowing what I actually like, staggering. I could have all the games I have on my shelf still now doubled, but good games or games that I would still want to play. But all that said, and all that experience, I would still struggle to describe exactly the kind of games I tend to value, not just what I like. I like games that are a complete play experience each time. So not something that leaves you hanging or is going to introduce new elements every time you play. I like games that have multiple paths to victory or well balanced, which is different from everything being equal. Some games have gone into just we'll do anything and we'll give you the same number of points. Games that are low bookkeeping or at least transparent in how they process the mechanisms. Games that have strong decision points and particularly games you can improve at. So those are kind of things I came up with when I was thinking about what games I like and where I'm at now for my gaming landscape.
I think the ability to develop your skill at a game or in a game beyond kind of just learning the cards or what cards are good, but actually being able to sort of that there is a strategic depth to the game that can be discerned and worked on. I think that's a really rewarding experience, and actually it's quite present in my number one game.
Yeah. And so did you had some worse game experiences, shall we say, in the past, or did you came in through the same path you were saying with Munchkin?
Well, Munchkin features in. Actually, it's really interesting, I guess, because I'm a few years younger than you, but actually, in my early 20s, the games that got stuck in my collection after I left home were actually exactly. Well, I had Munchkin already, but were Dominion and Galaxy Trucker as well, which is wild. But I grew up. I've got a twin brother, so we would play games together, and very much the formative games from my childhood are Hero Quest. But that was part of. Because Hero Quest was a co-op between Milton Bradley and Games Workshop, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we got into that via Games Workshop, actually. So it's Games Workshop, Warhammer, Fantasy Battles, and Warhammer 40k. It's Space Hulk, and it's also Magic the Gathering. We got super into Magic the Gathering, and then D&D. So we used to play a lot of those things when we were kids. And I had a D&D group at my school that not a group, but a group of friends that would play D&D. That I'd go and do.
Nerd.
Then I had nerd, exactly. But we got super into Magic the Gathering as well, sort of as a collective group of friends. So we never really got into like competitive Magic or going to tournaments or anything like that. But just as a group of friends, we'd get together and we'd deck build and we'd try to counter each other and all this nonsense. So we had a very strong internal meta, which probably felt a little bit like a tournament. But none of us were really good at figuring cards out or like finding good combos or anything. So it was actually probably the most fun way to enjoy Magic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those were sort of the games I was playing as a kid there, and then we had a handful of like sort of hobby style board games. Escape from Calditz was a big one, and there's something called the Sorcerers Cave, which a buddy of mine had, which is just like the most basic game. You'd pick one of the 4 genders, so like wizard, fighter, dwarf, or rogue or something, and you'd go off into the into the Wizard's Cave, the Sorcerer's Cave, and it's effectively just a maze, and you just flip over cards, and they've just got stuff on them, and it just randomly hits you. It's a pure lottery.
Right.
And one of the characters was massively more powerful than the other characters. I don't know, I remember really liking that for reasons. I've always been a bit of a gambler, actually. I like games with luck in it. And if a game entices me, push your luck is my absolute downfall.
Right. To just always go that one card too far, that one.
I just can't help it. I've gotten better. I've gotten a bit better. But anyway, and then, when I went away to university, I left a lot of stuff behind because I just didn't have room for anything. And I picked up Dominion, and I picked up Galaxy Trucker, and I went and I played sort of various things at university, sort of hobby games, lots of Knizia stuff. Tigress Euphrates came up then. And so Dominion is one that I really like, but now I actually can't really. It doesn't get into my top list, and I think that's because we've played it so much online that I struggle with it in real life now. You know, I find it feels almost like a kind of a waste to play it with people in real life because
potentially,
we could be playing
like I've set it up, so I've taken all the expansions that I have, and I've cultivated, or curated would be a better word, fixed kingdoms. So I've got like 30 or 40 kingdoms of the 10 cards, which you can then shuffle in the events and the other bits you can just kind of paste in for a little bit of variety, because I don't play it enough that those kingdoms will become stale.
Yeah.
Like if I was, if 30 or 40 kingdoms I'd solved the meta on, then yes, I could play Dominion normal. But yeah, same as you, play the app with the random ones for that different problem-solving element of it, or more regularly.
Yeah, and that's what me and my friends have got. I mean, I played it a lot with my partner because I had it when I came to London, and she really likes games, but she can't play video games because she doesn't like screens and sitting at computers. So we got big into Dominion, and then I've got another buddy, and we've played it hundreds of times, and probably almost entirely with the randomized kingdoms. And now we've played it even hundreds and hundreds more on the app, and setting it up in real life, randomizing all the kingdoms every time, and it's so much faff. And it's, the thing is as well, like in an actual social setting, it's a very sort of solo play type game. There's a small number of cards that can cause player interaction, but it's few and far between. And so the most thing you're interested in is, did someone take a victory point card from the pool or not? And who's got it?
I like it for those reasons, to be honest. Like the solving the puzzle at the start, there is a pivot point often where actually I see what they've done. I need to make a couple of changes in order to get my engine running better, and then can I get into the greening before they do? And the efficiency puzzle is actually what I like.
Yeah, no, 100%. But you're a lot more able to focus on that on the app, I think, because it's just, everything's so fast.
Yeah.
But it allows, I guess, the downtime to be on sort of focusing on the puzzle solving part of it rather than on, I don't know, shuffling and adminning and tracking actions and so forth.
A lot of shuffling in Dominion.
A lot of shuffling, and a lot of like, I play a village, that costs an action, so I'm down to 7 and back up to 9.
Yeah.
And but we've got, because Dominion functionally is, if for those of you that don't know, is a deck building game, but it's a classic deck building game that has this mechanism where all the cards are open face at the very beginning, and there's no new cards revealed over the course of the game. Now, there are some concepts in the game and the expansions that mess with this premise, but fundamentally that's how it works. And so it's very much reading 10 cards and trying to work out the quantities that you want in your deck? Can you thin out the 10 bad cards you start with in order to get to this sort of efficient engine that's going to allow you to purchase the big expensive victory point cards that will clog up your deck before your opponents are able to purchase those cards? The puzzle is fundamentally based around these 3 mechanisms in the game, which are the actions that allow you to play cards every round, the card power that lets you draw more from your deck so you can play more cards, and the buying that lets you buy cards from the kingdom, and then you need actual money to do that as well. But we've become so sort of adept at these randomized puzzles that the first thing everyone's looking for when the puzzle comes out is like, are there buys, are there actions, are there double actions, is there trash, what's the money, what's the economy look like? And so everyone just sits there quietly for like 10 minutes looking at the 15 minutes just reading all the cards and trying to figure out exactly what's going on in this particular puzzle, and then everyone sort of comes up with a solution, and then it's just a case of implementing it and potentially pivoting.
Yeah.
And it's such an addictive puzzle. I've played it so many times, but I wouldn't get it out physically.
As I said, what I've done with do it, the kingdom's immediately there, and then we can go, right? There's no faffing about with mixing it up. It's the only real way I'd play it in kind of real life now. Like, I don't want to be shuffling them all up and getting them out at random to potentially have a kingdom that doesn't work.
And that's, I think, one of the other things about the digital implementation. There are a few cards that people don't like, so we've got a ban list. You're allowed to have a ban list. But the other thing is that because it's so fast, you can actually sort of explore these kingdoms where, for example, there's no buys. So every turn you can buy just one card. How does that affect your strategy? Things like that. And it's very interesting. But yeah, in real life, that would be miserably long. It would be far too long.
I do have one miserable-ish kingdom that's all to do with how you trash and how you get cards and things like that. It was a fun puzzle, but not... I ended up playing it with some first-time players, and I was like, oh, sorry. This is a more advanced one for it.
The kingdoms with no trash, again, very long games, unless they're digital.
Yeah, which is just faster overall. So yeah, I mean,
that was a big diversion. Sorry about that, everyone.
Hey, Dominion's a great game, and I'll talk about it more. And perhaps definitely in the future. Perhaps definitely. That seems like a waste of one of those words.
If you want to see me and Barry live stream some digital Dominion games, let us know. I actually got so they released Dominion digitally on Steam, and the company who made it sent me a review copy of all of the content for it. I don't know how they knew I liked Dominion. I don't think they did know. I don't even know how they knew who I was. But they just sent me an email out of the blue, and they were like, if you set up Ready Steady Play's email on our Steam app, you will have access to all the DLC.
Nice. I've only got a couple, but well worth it.
I mean, so up until this point, I'd been using the browser-based digital implementation, which has a subscription fee to access everything. And I'd found that fine. It was an amount of money I was happy to play because we play it frequently enough. And occasionally, if it looked like we weren't going to play for a while, I'd let the subscription lapse. I think it's something like £3 or €4 or something per month, and you get every card.
Anyway, yeah, you're right. This is getting into a bigger and bigger tangent about Dominion. Welcome to Ready Steady Play Podcast Dominion Edition. No,
I was going to say, if you're watching this on YouTube, comment down below and let us know if you'd like to see me and Barry stream Dominion.
If you want to see you get beat, no problem.
Oh yeah, you're going to handle my fully randomized kingdom with all those cards you've never seen?
Yeah, I'll be fine. There's another expansion just announced as well.
Oh, is there? Oh my god.
Expansion 16 or whatever we're up to now.
Is that? It's not Renaissance, it's a newer one?
No, it's a whole new one. Was Plunder the one that's just out?
Yeah, I think it was Renaissance then Plunder.
Yeah, and so there's another entirely new one by the end of the year.
My god. So this is a post-recording interlude. Barry is correct. There is a new big box expansion for Dominion coming out called Rising Sun. It has only been announced this year and no release date has been set. This will be the 16th big box expansion for Dominion. So yeah, I mean, and once my partner and I got into Dominion, then we were off to the races. It was just way back into the hobby board gaming, which I was already into, but that was probably around 2011 or 12 when the hobby was really picking up steam. So it was the perfect time to sort of be getting back into hobby board gaming in a big way.
Yeah.
And then in 2016, I started the YouTube channel, so the rest is all she wrote, really.
And people can watch your gaming progress from there, yeah. Just to round out kind of where I'm at now, I suppose, like I'm just as likely to play a solo game as with anybody else. At least that way I get a decent game with somebody. I play a ton of escape and detective games, but I'm heavy into card games. So yes, I also played Magic back in the day and still now with some of the Universes Beyond stuff, but any card game I'll be interested in. I'm not huge on the massive campaign games, and I'm not huge on legacy games. And also from what you probably heard, just me describing my journey so far, you may find that I'm quite critical. I might be a little passé or blasé about some things that other people might be excited about, or even potentially negative on games, because that's just my go-to personality. But on the other side, I do like games. I do like playing games. And the first time I play a game, I almost always want to play it again. But that is the dichotomy of man there. So...
well, and despite it being almost the antithesis of your wheelhouse, you came for 8 ISS Vanguard live streams.
I did, yeah, like it. Yes.
He persevered as long as he could, folks, and he made a big effort for us all.
As long as I could. It's just like, oh no, just be over already. Oh
no, it's not even halfway through. I'm out. Yeah, I think I probably... I'm quite particular about what I like, but I've also got, I think, a much broader pool of genres to pick from than you, so...
Well, as I said, there's a slight difference between what I value and what I like. Like, I like a lot more things, but in terms of something that would get me to say, yeah, this is a game you've got to play, as opposed to, yeah, it's all right. There's quite a gulf.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like, committing to play a game, if it's not a big ask, then you try a game. Why not play a game? There's very few games that are so offensively bad you're going to be like, I deeply regret this. But on the other hand, there's a lot of games where you could probably have just played something better,
Yeah.
But that's what we're here to sort of talk about, and again, it depends how niche your genre interests are, right? Like, if you're into a very specific kind of board game, then of course you're going to be much more interested in the increasingly niche entries in that genre. Whereas if, you have a much broader taste like me, you might not go too niche within a specific type of game.
Yeah, I'm definitely an omni gamer as well. Like, I'll play anything. I enjoy a lot of mechanisms and... But just, yeah, will I be like, yeah, that was fine? Or, 3 out of 5 Barrys. Getting to 4's much more elusive.
Well, I don't, and we're going to talk about what gets 4 or 5 Barrys in just a minute, but I don't play Warhammer anymore. I've sort of grown out of a lot, not grown out of, that's the wrong term. I've become far too busy to play a lot of lifestyle games. During actually that resurgence and interest in hobby gaming, I became big into the X-Wing miniatures game, and I played that competitively for 4 or 5 years. And we had a podcast actually that we did on that as well. I love the X-Wing miniatures game. I got really into that, but since I stopped playing that to focus on the YouTube channel, I don't really play any lifestyle games anymore. I haven't played Magic since I was a teenager. I haven't played Warhammer since I was a teenager. I wouldn't go back to those now, just because I think the sort of price of entry to play a good game of those is so high, or like, an interesting game of those, I guess. And the thought of trying to learn the rules for Warhammer 40k at this stage just makes me upset. Like
10th edition, 11th edition, whatever we're on now.
Oh my God.
Well, I hope you can play some Commander still for Magic at some point.
I've never played... Commander didn't exist when I played Magic.
Like when I were a lad.
When I were a lad, yeah. But I'll still play D&D. Or any tabletop RPG. I love those. I'm more than happy to play. I don't have a campaign at the moment, but I will get one if I have the opportunity to do so.
Well, I just got the Twilight Imperium sourcebook and campaign.
That's the tabletop RPG based on the FFG Twilight Imperium game.
Yeah, the Genesis system.
Yes.
From, is it Edge that publish it now?
Yeah, I have the Genesis system, actually, and I played a few campaigns in... It wasn't Terranoff. It was other fantasy world, but, using their Terranoff campaign setting. And I really like Genesis, actually. I thought it was a really pleasant RPG world.
Yeah, I've not played too much of it. I played some Netrunner.
Yeah, and actually, I was just going to quickly say about Genesis as well. But I've never explored the source book for Android.
Obviously, as a big Android setting fan, I do have that, along with the Worlds of Android art and world book they kind of put out as well, which was good. If you've never played it, I also have Magical Kitties Save the Day as an RPG, if you ever wanted to play that.
I'd be more than happy. Yeah, as a cat fan. It's a shame my cat's not making an appearance on this video, but...
you could even play as Bonbon.
But, yeah. Yeah, I could play as... Oh my god. I'd have to be, like, chaotic evil. Right. So, that's our introduction. It's gone a little over the time I allotted for it, but we're going to move on now to 5 games that we adore. And this is a sort of a section that we've put together. This is all part of our first episode introduction, where we really just wanted to talk a little bit about our history as gamers and with the hobby and what we like, and one of the reasons why we wanted to do this, other than to get our review content out there and sort of talk about games in a review context, but a little bit more casually than the formal video reviews I make for the channel. On the show, we've actually got 2 sort of review formats anyway on the YouTube channel. We've got Ready, Steady, Played, which is a bit more of a formal review, and then we've got the Final Thoughts, which was originally a roundtable discussion that was a bit more free-form following our playthroughs. But I haven't done the big series like we used to on the YouTube channel for a little while, and so I'm not really doing the Final Thoughts anymore. And the Ready Steady Played videos, I really want to make sure that I've played the game a lot and I can give quite a comprehensive review. And so I wanted a format for these more casual discussions, and that's where the podcast is sort of going to go moving forward. And we might have more in-depth reviews if we've both played a game, or more specialist topics as well to discuss and bring you guys as well. But we're going to talk a bit more about that stuff in the future episodes. But for now, in this next section, we're going to talk about 5 games that we really like, to give you a little bit more insight into what we enjoy, what our sort of preferred genres are, and that'll help inform you guys as well when we're discussing games moving forward.
Yep, definitely. People need to know if their tastes align with ours to how to value our reviews, right? So, will I go first, or will you go first?
Why don't you kick us off, Barry?
Very well, I shall. So, when you suggested this, it was pretty tough to pick just, a handful of games to talk about, because there's so many good games.
I said, pick 5 games that you really, really like to talk about. That's what I said.
And so that's what I've gone for, right? So for one reason or another, these are games that inspire me, or can provoke a reaction from me. And I'm going to pick one that we've played on the channel, actually, and that is Crypted. So I obviously came along to your 24-hour live stream for the charity stream, and brought Crypted.
The Thankmas charity live stream. Yep, every December, 24 hours of board gaming.
People can join, yeah, and went really well. But Cryptid's a game that whenever I'm scanning the shelf for what to play, my eye always goes to it. And I always want to play it, and sometimes not with the right crowd of people, or other people don't like it as much as me. But if you've not seen it, Crypted is a 3 to 5 player game from, or deduction game from Osprey, designed by Hal Duncan and Ruth Beavers. It's really easy to learn. There's not a lot of things you can do in it. It plays under an hour, and you can play it with anybody. You can teach the rules, and everybody would kind of get what they're trying to do from the get-go. It's not one of those games you have to play and then come back to understand what's going on. So the deduction element of the game, players are trying to identify which hex on the map is the only possible space which fulfills all the conditions for this cryptid's habitat. All right, but each player only has part of that information, and you have to deduce the other player's clues. And so it'll go round and round, players taking turn asking questions, confirming information until someone makes a guess that the other players can't refute, and then that player has found the location of the cryptid. So I love deduction games. Turing Machine, Break the Code, Break the Cube, Search for Planet X, or even Love Letter in a sort of small version of it. And deduction is different from social deduction, right? So just to separate those in people's minds. But the reason I love it is because it makes you feel smart, right? Or stupid if you don't get it. But all of these games often come down to the wire. I just needed one more bit of information, or if I'd known that, then I could have got it. So it comes down to being a better, asking a better question, making a better leap of logic, and being rewarded with it. So it's different from, a big combo or a solid play. It's the potential for making you feel smart, even though arguably, give it another couple of rounds, everybody would have got there, right? You're only just ahead of the curve. But that dopamine hit is so good for when you solve it first. And that's kind of why I've picked Crypted, because it's a slightly bigger deduction game that's still fast to play. And as I said, it's always something my eye goes to when I want to break it out. And one of the interesting things about Crypted, it was one of the first games that I'm aware of that used an algorithm to make the board and to make the layouts and to make the clues. I know that Turing Machine's done the same since then. And it's just clever that it works, and every map layout works on a different space for 3 to 5 players, on like a different hex at each player count and everything. And if you go to playcrypted.com, you can actually generate additional maps, and there is also a 2-player variant on there as well, if you did only have a one other person to play with. But it definitely shines more at sort of the 3 to 5 range where it suggests that you play. I don't know what you thought of Cryptid when we had a go.
Yeah, I remember playing Cryptid, and at that point I think I was about 20 hours into my 24-hour live stream, so that's maybe important context, but I really liked it, actually. I thought it was very clever, and when you think about these sort of games that are logical deduction puzzles, very often they're driven by narrative. Actually, my mind typically goes to Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective or Suspects, which is, and those are more narrative driven, but they're still the same kind of premise in that you're getting clues and you're going to be, but in those games you're awarded sort of a score for doing it faster. So if you can take these sort of intelligent or insightful leaps of logic, you'll get a higher score. Whereas in Cryptid, the challenge is to ask questions based on insights into what clues the other players have, which you can only really discern based on the questions that they're asking and the answers they're giving, right? So you're looking for this sort of a sense of what is going on. And I'm not at all surprised that it's designed, or that there was a sort of an algorithm used in creating the puzzle when you say that, because it does feel like a sort of a very mathematically precise thing that your squidgy human brain is trying to unravel. But I enjoyed playing it, and I would happily play it more. Now, we played it at 3. What's the is that the best player count?
I think it's 3 or 4 is slightly better, because you get a few more turns just by going round and round. Where there's more players, people are giving away more by the time it comes back to you. So you're getting less opportunities, or fewer opportunities to ask a question, perhaps. But there are more clues to figure out. So I say it works at every player count. that it suggests within the 3 to 5 range. I'm not sure how Board Game Geek suggests. Let's have a little look since we're here. You hear me tippy tapping. Best at 4, it says. So yeah, that's probably accurate, but I think it plays absolutely fine at 3 and 5.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot at 3. Even though I think I lost every one of them horribly. I will jump in here with my first entry then, and I did do a big sort of review of the games that I'd rated highly on Board Game Geek, and I guess it's worth noting here that I haven't updated my BGG list with a lot of contemporary stuff, so a lot of these were already quite classic games, but I think I mentioned earlier in the introduction that Tigress and Euphrates was one of the hobby games I picked up at university at the club I would go to there, and it is the first entry on this list. I really like Tigress and Euphrates. I really like, actually, each of the games in this series, which is to say 2 at the moment, but there's a third on the way, of course. I'm happy to play either. I think they're both equally good. I actually am quite a big fan of Reiner Knizia in general, but Tigress and Euphrates is if you don't know it at all, a tile-laying game where every player has a hand of tiles hidden behind a screen and 5 commanders who match the different tiles in front of their screen. And over the course of the game, you will be building civilizations using the tiles, which represent the different citizens living in the civilizations. So you've got farmers and soldiers and priests. Actually, I don't think you have soldiers in Tigress. I think that's in Yellow and Yangtze. They've become soldiers, because that resolves things slightly differently. But in Tigress and Euphrates, you will be, on your turn, taking 2 actions. You'll be putting out tiles onto the board. And if you add tiles into a collective of tiles where you have a matching commander, you're going to get a point in the color of that tile. So if it's the fisherman, it's a blue point. And what's interesting about the game, or one of the things that really makes the game interesting, is that at the end, you will only have a score equal to the smallest number of these points that you've collected. So if you've got only 2 blue points, your score will be 2. So you need to keep an roughly equal level of all colored tiles that you can score. Conflicts arise in the game when somebody tries to put a commander into a civilization, which is a collection of tiles on this board, matching another player's commander, in which case the 2 commanders will fight to the death and one will win. Or if 2 of the cities touch each other. So the cities are expanding outwards as more and more tiles are added, so players can collect more tokens with their commanders, and then 2 cities will touch and they'll go to war, and all matching commanders of one type, or each matching pair of commanders, will fight to the death, leaving only a set left of unique colors. So it's just this sort of argy-bargy back and forth of people sort of trying to track who's got which tokens, what people's scores might be, trying to figure out who to gang up on, and trying to figure out where they can get their own points as well, while managing this hand of tiles. And there's all these kind of fun nuances as well. You can build up these pyramids that will give you points at the end of your turn, and then that becomes a highly desirable thing to try to take from somebody. You can also ditch your entire hand and draw 5 new tiles, and that's often used actually by players as a mechanism to escalate towards the end game, which is triggered by the bag running out of tiles. So there's a lot of player agency over controlling the length of the game as well. It's just a lot of players interacting with one another and trying to read the board state and hidden information. So a lot of things that I really like.
I've only played it on the app. So I've never actually played a real life game. I did see it at the Board Game Expo, like 2015, 2016, back when FFG republished it, but I never managed to get a game going. It's the Knizia scoring, right? So your lowest high score, I think, a fun thing that he does in his games. So I would like to give it a go. Is this being published by somebody else at the moment? Do you know?
Yeah, so Tigress and Euphrates was, and it's the same scoring mechanism, actually. I don't know how many times he's used it, but it's certainly repeated in Ingenious. If you've ever played Ingenious, that uses the exact same scoring mechanism. They stopped printing Tigress and Euphrates, so he made a second edition, which is called Yellow and Yangtze, which was published by Holy Grail Games. I'm going to double check that that's right, because there's Grail Games and
just Grail Games, I think.
It was published by Just Grail Games. Yes, exactly. But Grail Games have stopped collaborating with him, so Yellow and Yangtze went out of
Board
print.
game drama.
They had been working on a expansion at the time. Yeah, I think it was in a disagreement over contracts. And then they actually sort of quietly released a number of games that had in production afterwards. And I don't, like, King's Road specifically springs to mind. That sort of very quietly came out because I think they were printing it when they parted ways, which goes to show just how robust those board game contracts are. But Yellow and Yangtze has sort of a key difference to Tigress and Euphrates. This won't really make sense to anyone who doesn't know the games, but if you know either of the games and you're listening, the main thing is that in both games, a war takes place when two kingdoms meet. So the kingdoms are the collections of tiles, right? And so when you're placing a tile on the board, you're typically adding it to a kingdom, and then the commander who's in that kingdom generates the points. And so when two kingdoms get so large that they touch, or when one player is deliberately trying to make them touch to create conflict, then they go to war, and the war is resolved across the connection that's just been made. And in Tigress and Euphrates, the commanders will sort of go to war one by one based on their color type, and you can commit matching tiles from your hidden pool to boost your strength, and the strength is based otherwise on how many matching tiles that the commander has within their own kingdom. So in Yellow and Yangtze, instead of looking for tiles matching the colors of the commanders, they sort of have an all-out war where both sides go to war, and their total strength is not based on matching tiles, but on red tiles called soldiers. In Tigress and Euphrates, the red tiles are called priests, and they don't work that way. But in Yellow and Yangtze, the war is it's quicker to resolve because it's kind of just one thing with a total strength that only comes from the soldier tiles, and then players can commit additional soldiers. And what's notable about it as well is that players who are not involved in the war can commit tiles from their hidden screens as well. So it's a bit faster, it's a little bit more dependent on whether or not you have those soldier tiles, but I think they're both really good. I wouldn't be bothered about playing one over the other, and I'm happy to play either. So after Knizia left those, a Polish war games company called Phalanx Games swooped in and picked up the rights, I guess, although not to Yellow and Yangtze, because I guess the title was trademarked. So it's Yellow and Yangtze, but it's been renamed Huang, Huang, and they are reprinting it. It was a Kickstarter, I think, about 18 months ago. It's, I think, right now in the process of shipping. Not shipping to backers, but shipping from China to distribution centers, because I, of course, backed a copy. It's on the boat. Yeah, I did buy it, even though I've already got Tigress and Yellow and Yangtze. That's how much I like this. But they did do a bunch. They did print that expansion for Yellow and Yangtze that never came out, and a few other bits in there as well, and a playmat and stuff. So I'm excited for that to turn up anyway. But I just really like this format and the ruthless player interactions and players desperately trying to track how many cubes everyone has, because it doesn't matter if Barry's got 60 cubes if they're only in 3 colors. He needs the 4th color. Oh, that's the other big difference about Yellow and Yangtze, actually, is it's got a wild color that you can add to anything. I think there are wilds in Tigress and Euphrates, but they're amulets that you have to rob from temples, so they're harder to come by than the wilds in Yellow and Yangtze. And there's some differences as well between, like, the temples that you make in Tigress and the pagodas you make in Yellow and Yangtze. But listen, don't worry about that. They're both equally good, and they're great games.
Same feel, right? It's the same mouth feel.
Yep. I actually didn't add Yellow and Yangtze to my review list here because Tigress was on it, and I'd happily play either.
Yeah, that's the same.
All right, back to you, Barry. What's your next one?
Sure. Well, the second game I'm going to go with is Seasons. Right, so Seasons is a game I've played over 100 times, which is about 95 times more than anybody else in my group, so nobody will play with me. Even though I'm not that good at it, I just know the cards too well and kind of smash people whenever we play. So Seasons is a 2 to 4 player game from Libelid. Are they French? Some French.
They sound French.
Designed by Regis Bonasset. It's gamer weight, but there are ways to make the game easier by removing sort of drafting from it. It plays in about 20 to 25 minutes per player. Highly competitive, and even, they've gone as far as having like tournament level setups for how you can put it together. So it's a card and dice drafting game that you need to consider forward planning. There is dice rolling, so there's that randomness there. You've got to worry about what's in your hand, so the hand management. But basically, you're building up a tableau that's going to give you abilities, score you points. Has a little bit of take that in there. But you're trying to get the most points set up in your tableau and amongst the sort of victory points you can collect before a variable game ends, right? It's player driven. It's when you take a dice, depending on what dice is left at the end, determines how fast the game goes. So players can kind of manipulate the timings on those and trying to get ahead at the right times. So it's quite a lot going on, but it's not as complicated as it seems. Now in the full game, players are going to start by drafting 9 cards, which are set aside into 3 groups of 3 to be added in subsequent phases of the game. So even from the very beginning, the decision making is interesting, both in card drafting, but also in how you set up those ages. Can you get your engine going earlier? Are you not going to get the power or the resources to get your engine till the second age? And can you leave your scoring till the third age if they've got abilities that are powerful that you might want earlier? So immediately you've just got interesting decisions. And then the game plays out by players rolling dice for whichever of the 4 seasons you're in. Hey, that's the name of the game. And players draft those dice for resources, can get them additional cards, can get them points, can be used as abilities. And as I said, whatever dice is left dictates how fast the round goes, or how fast the turn goes, which will move you into other seasons and eventually the next age and then the end of the game. So cards played into your tableau can give you different things you can trigger at different points, and similar to say Dominion, right? Your engine versus your point scoring. You don't want all engine that's just producing resources if you've no way of converting them into points. And then once that 12th season has passed, you just add them all up. So the theme, I think, is like paper thin, like you're a wizard at a tournament or something. I've never really known. It's set in the same universe as Zidit, but I've never played Zidit, so I couldn't really tell you if there's more to it than that. And I love it because it's a bit of everything, right? Drafting, engine building, there's attacking, there's resource management, the tournament balancing play, and it all works. So most of my games of this have been on Board Game Arena, and the expansions are in the works for them. But on there it plays 10 minutes per player, and everything's just satisfying. This is a game where you can get that sweet combo off. You can time your transmutations into points, or resources into points just right. There's hate drafting. There's just everything that a growing boy could need in a game, and I think it's a lot of fun to play. Have you had a go at this one?
No, I actually remember when this came out because it was 2012, so that was back when I was in the hobby, just getting back into the hobby in a big way, and I do remember it coming out, and I never had the chance to play.
It is on Board Game Arena, so we can play after this. But it's a lot of fun. The problem is, of course, when I've played it 100 times, I know every card that's in the game inside out. And so I know what I'm looking for. When I see that my starting hand of cards and when the drafting's happening, I'm going to be ahead from the start, and then I know what I'm kind of aiming towards. And so somebody that's coming into the game for the first time, I try and do something a bit different, right? I think there's a social contract there to not go all out and smash somebody, unless they're really the kind of person that wants to learn the game to the same level. But you really want somebody else that's good at the game, or of a comparable level, because I don't think I am that great at the game. But to have a fair game.
Yeah. I mean, a good game's a close game, right?
Or if somebody's crying and it's not you, one of the two.
Yeah, you go for one of those bizarre strategies. Well, that sounds neat. And, I always like a game where I can play as a wizard doing spells. So I think it's kind of amazing that I never got around to trying
We'll
this.
definitely do it soon.
I like dice too.
What's your next pick?
I'm going to continue along a path of totally predictable. My next one's Hanza Teutonica. If you've not... I got this back when it came out, which was actually quite late. God, when did it come out? I think it must have been 2011.
100 years ago at least. It's one of the old school Euro Brown games, right? 2009.
Right, so that was probably something... I mean, I probably came across this when I was in gaming in the university group then. That would have been when I was just moving to London. But I've got my... Hanza is a game where you play as German merchants trying to gain advantages in the medieval trading group known as the Hanseatic League.
Yawn. Tell me why it's good, Mike.
So the reason Hanza is good is... It is... I mean, Hanza... by the way, Tigress and Euphrates, best at 4 players. Hanza, best at 4 or 5 players. Works okay at 3. Actually, best at 3 and 5, probably, because at 4 you flip the board and it's a little bit more forgiving.
Right.
But in the game, you've got... the game is a set of rounds, and it's actually... The end game is triggered by someone reaching 20 points. So there's quite an important distinction between points you score during the game and points you score during the end game. But functionally, everyone gets their own board, and on that board, you've got a series of tracks. Ooh. But what you're going to do is you're going to put cubes all up in the tracks, and the tracks are upgrades. And then you will be able to unlock these powers over the course of the game. So immediately there's kind of this incredible strategic horizon where it's like, which tracks am I going to unlock? Because you definitely can't do them all. And if you can, then the other players have not been keeping their eyes on you and they've dropped the ball because now they're going to lose. Functionally, the board is a series of routes. It's routes connecting towns all over Germany and Austria and possibly further afield, or maybe it's actually closer in Germany. There are like 4 boards or something. There's a Great Britain board. I've got a bunch of boards, but the core board is somewhere around Germany, and it's all these cities that are connected up by routes, and the routes are made up of spots where you can place your traders and merchants. And this is an important distinction, but traders are little cubes and merchants are bigger discs in your player color. And you'll be able to unlock more of these as you go. But much like another classic, which is El Grande, you've got an important distinction between the pieces that are available to you and the pieces that are not available to you to place. So you've sort of got a supply off to the side, and then you make them available, and then you can put them onto the board using one of the actions in the game. And you'll put them onto the routes that connect the cities on the board. And when you get a complete route of your pieces, then you can claim the route, which allows you to do one of 2 things, or maybe just one thing, depending on which route it is on the board. But typically, you'll take one of your pieces that you completed the route with and put it into one of the cities. The cities have a number of offices where the traders and merchants can live, and then every time someone triggers a route connected to the city that you just placed, and of course the cities are connected to multiple routes. So you can enter a city by claiming any of the routes connected to it. But when someone claims a route nearby, one of your claimed cities, then they will give you a point. And you're off to the race to the 20 points. It's off and going. However, then they might be able to get into the city and overtake you, because one of the upgrade tracks on your player board is the ability to access offices in the city, and whoever has the highest quality office will get the points. So you can take over cities that were previously owned by other players. Bummer. But where this gets particularly cutthroat is that certain tracks, certain routes on the board allow you to unlock your upgrade tracks. So you're going to be able to unlock your new player powers by triggering very specific routes that match. And there is only one city in the game that lets you unlock each power, and some of them are connected to just one route, and others are connected to maybe two. And so those become incredibly competitive. And what happens in the game when two players bump into each other on this route, well, that is the core gameplay, right? Because on your turn, you just get a set number of actions. You can put cubes out on the board. You can move cubes around on the board. But the big action is blocking other people's moves. So you get onto the route, you sit in their way, and then you either wait for them to leave politely, which they won't do, or they displace you. And displacing is basically the heart of this game. It's the action that gives this game spice and zhuzh. Someone has to kick you off the route so they can complete it and score it. And when they displace you, what happens is they get to take a trader and they put it into the spot that you occupy, and then you get to take two traders. You get to take the trader that's just been displaced and another trader from the supply and put them onto adjacent routes. I've said the supply confidently because that's what I remember. I've played this so many times, Barry, and I'm still not sure if that's definitely right.
It's either, you've either got it or you can take it from the supply. I can't remember either.
I think you get to add it from the supply, so it's kind of like double action benefit, right? Getting displaced gives you like this double benefit. And I think, maybe the person that displaces you, they have to pay one. Do they have to pay one back to their supply? Yeah, they have to pay one back to their supply as well. So it's a really high cost to displace you, but it is probably worth it.
Well, you have to if you want to complete a route.
Probably.
Right?
You have to if someone's sitting in your way and you want to complete a route. So the game really is about action economy. You get 2 actions per turn, which you can upgrade by competing for the most competitive route on the board. You have to take an action to replenish your pool. If when you claim a route, they all go back to that supply. So you need to get them out of that supply back into your playable area, so you can put them back on the board. And this action efficiency, and of course, the best way to shortcut all of that is to be displaced. So you want to be looking for where people are, where do they want to be, where can you get in the way, so you can go there and just be in the way. And it just requires everyone to be paying attention to the board state all the time, everyone to be paying attention to the score, not just the current score during the game, but also the end game scoring opportunities people are unlocking, because there are at least 3 of those. You're going to get end game points for the largest chain of cities that you've built on the board. There's another track that you can get by triggering a route that allows you to secure some endgame points. And of course, there's actually a trans-board route that if you can complete, you actually get a ton of points. So that happens during the game and can quite often just escalate that player to the end game state if they're allowed to do it. Additionally, you get points for unlocking the tracks on your player board, and you're also going to get points for each city you're in. And then your chain can increase in value. There's a track that increases the value of that as well. So that's a different strategy you can go down if you're finding if you're finding that sort of opening for that. So it's just got all these different routes to victory and a lot of things that you have to keep your eye on. And it's best, with more players, because everyone's doing all these different things and you're trying to sort of get in the way of everyone and you're trying to work out who you need to be stopping. And it's just so Euro efficient, but so upsetting because everything is just blocked and everyone's trying to make your life as inefficient as possible so you can make their life more efficient.
So I was looking there at Hanza Sonica. I was like, I've played this. Why isn't it logged? But it was the big box version that came out in 2020. So I played this.
Yeah, so horribly out of print for many years, and then they came out with the big box version.
Got a few extra maps.
So fortunately now it's nice and readily available. Well, I mean, I have everything that's in that version sitting in a little tiny box. But I don't think they added any new content in the big box version.
Unsure, but so a couple of things I'd want to say about.
I'm sure I checked.
What I might be missing out. Yeah.
I definitely checked. Yeah, I don't want to miss out on Hanza Teutonica stuff.
So what you were saying there about the 4-player being arguably the worst counts, interesting. So I was lukewarm on Hanza, but I did play it 4-player. I've only played it once, and I think it's the kind of game that might be a little like Twa, where like I didn't get it entirely the first time I played. Twa had the sort of hidden objectives each player had, and I didn't know what everybody was working towards or what the things did. And Hansa, I think, at 4 players was a little loose. There wasn't a huge amount of displacing the way I can see kind of what the core of the game is like. And so I'd be interested to play again at 5 players, or if there is a smaller board at 3 players.
I mean, the board flips over for 3, so I think that works quite well. So that you just have a smaller board. But also the Britain board, I think, is actually quite good at 3 as well. I think that's a smaller board, if I remember. But I've played the expansion boards less.
Well, I'll definitely give it another go. Like I said, there's a little lukewarm on it, and it wasn't. It didn't immediately grab me as, oh, this is super interesting to go for. But there were a couple of interesting things in the game, and in most games, I would say having more actions is always better, right? So in a worker placement, having more workers is almost always better. Any game where you can, action compression or anything that gets you more. This game, what you're saying, you get 2 actions to start and you can build up. And I think you can get up to 5, maybe. I think it's 5's the top end of what you can get. But I don't think you need to go there. Like, I think you definitely need 3 actions. So at some point you need that 3rd action. But going to 4 depends on what you're trying to do. And going to 5 feels excessive.
So I think that Hanza, it's definitely an odd game. It's a little bit unusual, and I think that I think it does want at least someone who's played before to sort of give people some early game heuristics, because if you've played a lot of Euros, a lot of it will feel familiar, but the actual tone of the game is quite unfamiliar, because it presents itself as this Euro efficiency puzzle, but then it's highly interactive, and the efficiencies really come from getting in people's way and sort of being displaced. And so I actually think I do think that the action space is probably the most powerful on the board. The city that allows you to take that is called Göttingen. Göttingen. And I think that the routes connected to Göttingen are the most desirable in the game to control and claim. And so I think you could, if people are sort of unfamiliar with the game or they don't really know what they're looking for, then yeah, I can see why if you wouldn't get that. So you might not get that sort of high level of player interaction because people don't really understand the value of the game elements yet. And there's another track on your player board called the everything's in Latin, so they didn't have to make so they could make it language independent, but it's called the Liber Sophia, and there's a city up in the corner of the map that lets you unlock that, and that has 2 sort of elements. One is when you take the move action, you can move your cubes just from whatever route they're on to any other route, so your cubes just fly all over the board. And also when you unlock that upgrade track, you actually get more merchants, which are the discs, and the reason merchants are powerful is because they're more expensive for your opponents to displace. And so there's a strategy on the Liber Sophia where you get your merchants out and then you use them to displace, and when the merchants are displaced, you get to put your cubes out, and then you have more efficient movement, so you can sort of block even better, or maybe just quickly relocate a bunch of traders to a single route and then just trigger the scoring. And that's where the higher action counts come in, because when you get up to 5 actions, there's quite a lot of scope to complete and claim a route in a single turn. Yeah, which would be sort of 4 or 5 actions.
But you do have to go. So it's like 2 actions, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5. And the moving goes just 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And so actually, if you can do some good placement where you're getting what you're saying, the value out of being displaced and getting extra cubes down, then the moving becomes better than the placing at times, or quicker to get there. And
I think a really good player in Hanza doesn't want to be placing, or wants to only place like cubes in places on the board where they're going to be displaced. You know, you almost don't want to be sort of setting up your own claiming. You want to be just setting up to get displaced, and then, you know, use your turn to move everyone where you actually want them. But you know, I mean, you know, I'm sure there's people who've played a lot more Hansa than me out there that might be might think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I've not been on the strategy forums. As I said, I've played it once. I'll definitely give it another go at a more contentious player count, shall we say.
Yeah, and I would recommend also, you know, just, I think it's, I really generally, when I'm teaching a game, don't like giving any kind of strategy advice, because...
Because you keep it to yourself because you want to win.
No, because I don't like to assume that I know best, and I don't want to assume that I mean, as a player, I tend to be a little bit more of an emotive player anyway, so I tend to pick like sort of quite left field strategies. So my strategies may not always be the best. They're just kind of sort of a mechanism or a part of the game that's intrigued me, and I'm like, I'm going to see what I can do with that, you know? So I don't know if I'm best placed to be giving strategy advice, but I mean, with Hansa, the strategies are quite apparent, I think, but also... I think it's actually kind of helpful to say, like, hey, you know, the action routes are really powerful, so you should definitely be keeping an eye on that, because that can just instill a competition amongst players at the start, you know, that that sort of really gets the sort of the spirit of the game going.
Gotcha. All right, very good, very nice. Another one from me?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, well, let's go with... a little box game this time, and it is Friday. So Friday is a solo-only small box deck builder. It's got push your luck elements, your favourite, and it's designed and published by Friedman Fries through his company 2F Spiele. So Friday was, I think, the first solo-only game I got. I did get it after Space Hulk Death Angel, which is arguably a solo game, but you can play it with more players. But I think Friday holds up. You know, I played it 3-4 times just in this last week, and each game was fun, which is the core reason to really play any game. But if we go back to when I first got it, it also taught me a lot about gaming. So I did own Dominion by this point, by the time I bought Friday, so deck building itself wasn't new to me. But Friday is a very distilled version of the trashing element of deck building that really teaches you how to value thinning your deck and knowing what's coming up, and kind of controlling what cards you see. And when I first got Friday, I was quite bad at it, right? My first couple of games... Actually, my first couple of games I played wrong, and then I had to go in the forums and then try and get some videos and stuff, and then I figured it out. And it took me 3-4 games to get the flow of it down, even though it's quite simple, but I struggled with it initially. And then as I got better at it, I moved up the difficulty until I could like consistently beat it, right? And then that was kind of that flow of learning was really interesting to me. So to explain the game a little more, you are Robinson Crusoe. You have a starting deck of cards, things like 14 cards with values up to 2, but like there's 1, 2, 1, 2 1s, but most commonly 0s and -1 values on there, and some have abilities. And you start with a certain number of life points based on how the difficulty level you're going on it, and then you have to make your way through an adventure deck 3 times before fighting the pirate bosses at the end. And the main part of the game is you'll choose 2 cards, or you'll take 2 cards from the adventure deck, you'll choose which one you want to do, and the adventures aren't big story driven things, they're just target numbers based on how many times you've been through the deck. So the numbers start lower and build up, and so you can go for one that might be like 0 to start, and then in the second adventure be 4, and then it might be 14 for the last one. So you want to beat that before you get to the third time, but maybe the other one gives you a better ability or something. So you're just choosing an adventure, And that'll have a target value you need to get to with your cards. And remember, most of them are zeros and negative ones to begin with. And it'll also tell you how many cards you can flip over for free. So once you've chosen your adventure, you'd flip over cards from your deck. And if you've hit the target number, then you get to defeat that card, and then it goes into your deck. It's double-sided, and you'll get a better ability from that card, or maybe a higher value from it. Or if you don't beat it, then you can pay life to flip additional cards. Or you can choose to fail and pay life equal to the difference between your value and the target value. But the clever part of it is that every time you spend life for failing, you can remove a card from those that you flipped over. So if you flipped over a whole bunch of -1s, you can pay life to remove them from your deck, up to the value of the target number. And so it's a really fine balance between going all out and spending your life to thin the deck, because there will be some adventures that you don't beat and you need to spend that life to get more cards. And there'll be some where you're just like, well, I'm going to go and try and get as many negatives as I can to thin it out straight away. And if you over thin, every time you go through your deck, you add in an aging card, which is a bad effect. Or a low value or like a higher negative value. And once you've gone through the adventure deck 3 times, you fight some high value or super high value pirates. Like if you assume your target numbers are zeros to start with, pirates could be 45. But by that time, your cards are drawing you new cards. They're doubling values. They're adding life. They're letting you swap cards. They're letting you filter through your deck, doing all these things. From having won the adventures. So it was really interesting to me. It was a really good way to learn deck building and learn and see very notable progress, going from not being able to play it to winning the first difficulty level to then being able to just go up the difficulty level step by step until able to consistently but not always beat it. So it doesn't get pulled out too much now, but after going back just last week, it's still challenging to learn again and get back up to that sort of top level I was at. But it just teaches deck building really well. It teaches you how to push your luck really well, how to spend those resources really well, and pretty sweet little game. I don't know if you've played solo. Do you play much solo games? I guess you do on the channel, right?
Yeah, I mean, to answer this question very succinctly, not before the pandemic, when I started live streaming stuff solo.
Yeah. But you've not played Friday?
And now I play... No, I've not played Friday. I'm aware of it, and I'd definitely be interested in trying it out. But I still very rarely play solo on my own. I mean, I do from time to time, and I do enjoy it, actually. But typically, I think when I play solo, I play very much the opposite of the kind of thing you play.
Right, yeah, you're a bit bigger. Well, this is, it's a 20-minute game. It's really interesting. You can borrow it. My cards are yellowed and, I've had it for quite a while.
Yeah.
But I think it's...
a well-loved game.
Yeah, like a lot of people are less keen on it. I think it's got a lot of good things going for it. It does a lot in that small box, as long as you're looking for it.
I've heard a lot of people say that it's very good.
I would be in that camp.
And I think it's probably quite an easy recommend, because it's...
Yeah, it's pretty cheap. Like, there's not a lot in it. The components are nice. I mean, don't take my yellowed cards as a slight against it. It's just it's quite old now.
So my next game here is probably a bit of a hard one to actually recommend to anyone now, because I haven't played it for so long. Rather, I haven't played it in its current iteration, is what I mean by that. Because it's the X-Wing Miniatures game. It just came up number 3 on my list, so here it is. It was originally published in 2012 by FFG. Fantasy Flight Games, designed by Jay Little and others. And it is I mean, if you're unaware of it, it's a tabletop skirmish game. It's really designed to be head-to-head, 2 players, although you could do sort of a larger count free-for-all, but it's really a 2-player head-to-head game, and you take on the role of spaceships from the Star Wars world.
Pew pew.
Exactly right. The core game, of course, was the X-Wing versus 2 TIE fighters, which is not really enough ships to have an interesting game, but it was enough to introduce the mechanisms, which is fundamentally this. You set up a play area. It can really be any size, but the official size is 3 foot by 3 foot, and they don't have a map in the board, so you just have to set up borders as best you can. No, they don't have a map in the box. You have to set up borders as best you can, or you could have bought one of the X-Wing playmats that FFG published along with the game. And, I think they probably always intended for it to be sort of a lifestyle game, but and become quite a competitive game, but I don't think they ever expected it to take off in a competitive way the way it did. And that's most of my experience with it, is as a sort of a competitive game following quite strict tournament rules. But, I've also played it with my friends, and that's how I play it now, and I still really enjoy it. And it's, you take a selection of ships that you've got, and you set them up along the board edge in front of you, and your opponent sets up their ships along the board edge in front of them. And the basic game loop is that you want to, there are lots of scenarios. There's actually a really clever solo mode that was created as well, which was called... So this is another post-recording interlude here, and I'm just getting a little distracted jumping all around X-Wing here and talking about it, because it's a big thing, and it manifested in different ways. And as I say in the podcast here, I mostly played it competitive. I played a lot of regional tournaments and things like that. And I didn't really ever play it much as a casual tabletop game, but it absolutely could be played that way. And out of the box, you had scenarios that you could do, and it would give you some deployments and things like that you could set up, and you could recreate scenes from the movies, etc. But I never even explored any of those. I was largely just playing the competitive squad building format. And the other thing I'm trying to talk about here is the Heroes of the Arturi Cluster, which was a fan-made campaign where you played as the rebels and you took on the Empire. And that was originally created by Josh Dirksen, and then a second edition was put out by Sean Tiernan. And I just wanted to give them due credit because it was very, very good, and it introduced a solo mode, which FFG never published. And I think actually it could be played cooperatively as well. So, I just wanted to make sure I gave credit where credit's due. Many of the people I know who enjoyed this in a casual way really enjoyed the Heroes of the Arturi Cluster. But anyway, I liked it as a multiplayer head-to-head game, and that's my experience with it. And so you've got to destroy all of your opponent's ships. There are also scenarios where you have to do other things, but I never played any of those. I just did the head-to-head fight. And I must have played hundreds and hundreds of games of this, and I never got bored of it. But you have functionally like 2 phases in a round, right? Everyone has their selection of ships, and the ships all have a printed initiative, which is the order in which they'll move. So the first round is hidden movement, where you'll assign a secret maneuver to each of your ships, and each ship has a dial with different maneuvers on it, and some ships are very fast and agile and have lots of big maneuvers, and they can go very quickly, and other ships are very slow and bulky, but they might have lots of guns or armor, and they move slowly, and or the more agile maneuvers cause them to become stressed out, which is a condition you don't really want. And so every player will assign a maneuver to their ships in secret. Each ship gets a different maneuver. And then the second phase of the game will go through the ships in this initiative order. And it's the maneuvering phase. So you'll maneuver the ship according to the move that you've given it on the dial. And the game comes with a set of templates, a set of, I'm going to say, 11 templates. Yes, there are sharp turns, gentle turns, and straights. There are 5 straights, so you can go speed 1 up to speed 5, and then you can turn at speeds 1, 2, or 3, either a right angle turn or a more gentle 45-degree turn. And so it really evokes, actually, like World War I planes strafing and passing each other, because you've got this fixed set of 11 maneuver templates, and you can't pick them up and check to see where the ship would end up. You'd be telegraphing the maneuvers, and also it's against the rules. So you have to eyeball the board and try to guess where your ship is going to end up and hope that it's in the right place. Because after you've gone through all the ships in their ascending initiative order, so that means that the ships with the lowest initiative will move first, then you'll move on to the shooting phase, where every ship will then fire at the ships that it can fire at. And this will happen in reverse initiative order, so starting with the highest initiative. So the highest initiative pilots have all the advantages because they move last, so they can see where everyone else went before they actually have to move, and then they can shoot first. So they can shoot first before they potentially get shot and explode. And of course, those high initiative pilots tend to be more expensive. So you get like one or two sort of hotshot pilot, maverick pilots to run, or you can just have an army of clunky, slow, faceless henchmen. But where the combat is resolved with dice. So every ship has a printed arc on the front of it, and the ships move along the templates according to the way they are facing. So of course, if you want to change the facing of the ship, you have to start putting those turns in. And ideally, what you want to do is at the end of your maneuver, wind up with the arc on the front of the ship pointing at the enemy's ships. And if you've planned poorly, you've turned off in some direction, you're now facing the wrong way, and there's an enemy ship pointing at you, and if you're in real trouble, they're very close to you, because there's a range bonus if you're shooting at almost point blank, and a range penalty if you're shooting from very far away. And then you just pick up a bunch of dice and throw them. And again, like the ships with big guns get lots of red dice to throw in attack, and the ships that are very maneuverable, like the Imperial ships, they get lots of green dice to throw in defense. And so you'll throw the red dice looking for hits and the green dice looking for dodges, and then they cancel each other out. And if there's any hits left, you'll take that against the hull of your ship. And if you take damage up to your hull, then you'll explode and die. And if you're a puny little TIE fighter, you'll have very low hull, and any kind of hits will just blow you out the sky. And if you're a more durable X-Wing, for example, you'll have some shields that can deflect particularly nasty attacks, and once you run out of shields, you'll start taking damage to your hull and explode and die. And it is the second guessing, it's the bluffing of the maneuvering, trying to pick what maneuvers you need to do, trying to eyeball where they're going to put you, trying to guess what your opponent's going to do, trying to remember which maneuvers their ships can do. If you're playing this competitively, you've got every ship dial memorized. But if you're just playing at home, at least you've seen some of their maneuvers already this game. They have been moving around. You have some idea about what they can do. And actually, it's also, in the competitive scene anyway, not a faux pas to ask to look at someone's ship dial. So before they set the maneuver that they're doing, you can say, hey, can I see what maneuvers that ship can do? And they'll give it to you, and so you can check. That's totally allowed. But once they set their maneuver, you can't pick that dial up, because that's secret hidden information that you have to set, and that's so exciting. And then of course all these maneuvers are carried out, and there's all these sort of complex moves you can do, because there are these, once you've performed a maneuver, you can do an action, and those actions might be to take these focus tokens that help you hit with your red dice in the shooting phase, or they might be barrel rolls that allow you to pivot slightly in a linear way side to side, or you could do a boost which allows you to do a tiny extra turn, or jump forward after your maneuver. So if you think your positioning's not quite right, you can adjust it in a minor way. But of course that decision is quite agonizing, because really you want that focus token. And some ships, like the TIE fighters that are particularly maneuverable, can take an evade token which just adds a dodge, and they kind of live or die by whether or not they have a dodge. So because those green dice are not very kind. And it's just super exciting and thrilling. And then, you imagine someone lines up the perfect shot, and you imagine you're just dead, and then somehow you survive on one hull and limp on, and now they're all out of position because they didn't expect you to still be there. It's really exciting, and it captures Star Wars space conflict really thematically. It just feels like the best space battles from those first three films, or second three films, depending on how you think about it.
Well, I played a little bit of X-Wing, but mostly I collected the Scum and Villainy dollies and the little models. I didn't play too much. I did get the second edition upgrade kit for Scum and Villainy, but then I never got a game in. Once it changed in like 2018, and then eventually I don't store miniatures games anymore. Like, I don't have the space for them, so I had to get rid of X-Wing as well. But it was quite a fun game, and like I say, if you're fine with the programmatic part of the game and the bluffing and the expectation, the anticipation, I would say is that definitely the best bit of it.
Yeah. It's absolutely not bluffing like, say a social deduction game or something like that. It's very much a game of sort of cat and mouse, where you're trying to anticipate their move and what is the obvious move that you're going to do. Are you going to do it? Do you do the obvious move thinking that they're thinking that you're not going to do the obvious move? So it's this real sort of like, if I drink the poison in front of me, kind of scenario, which I just love. And of course you have to think about it for sort of every ship.
And there wasn't like, ships you could just field 2 ships, or you could field 8 TIE fighters.
Exactly right. So, you got really dynamic squads as well, where you might just have like Luke in an X-Wing and Han in the Millennium Falcon, and that's your whole squad. Or you might just have 8 Gubbins TIE fighters, that are very effective and scary at the start of the game, because you can move them all in formation, and players are opposite you are just thinking like, how on earth do I even approach this? If you wind up in front of it at any range, you're probably just gonna be destroyed. So you have to try to get behind it, get those TIE fighters out of formation and pick them off one by one. So it's just these really compelling puzzles, a bit like setting up those kingdoms in Dominion, I suppose. And I do think that the first edition of the game, which started out just Rebels versus Imperials from the original movies, and then a couple of years into the release of the game, they brought out Scum and Villainy, which was because Boba Fett started, and the Fire Spray started as an Imperial ship. And then later there was an Imperial version of Boba Fett and a Scum and Villainy version of Boba Fett. As the game just skyrocketed in popularity, there was actually a period where, in terms of game sales, and I don't have a source on this, so this is poor journalism, but there is somewhere a track of most profitable miniatures games, and I remember at some stage it eclipsed the Games Workshop products, and that was sort of unheard of.
Back in the glory days of FFG, almost, when they were doing a lot of organised playing.
Yeah, well, exactly. They really supported it, and it was really, really great. But I think it was probably about 5 or 6 years in, they'd really sort of run through, they'd really committed to only doing the original trilogy of Star Wars films. So they had just the Imperials, the Rebels, and the Scum and Villainy factions, and they'd been through, like, if you remember the scene in Empire Strikes Back, where all the bounty hunters are stood on the bridge of I want to say it's the Executor, which is the name of Darth Vader's Star Destroyer.
No disintegrations.
Exactly that scene, right? And those are the times, that's the only time in the movies that those bounty hunters appear, with the exception of Boba Fett. And I mean, those characters have all got major, like, sort of spin-off arcs in the EU, which is the extended universe that's now all been canned for the new movies. But when Disney
it's now Legends.
Yeah, when Disney bought LucasArts, but which was after the release of this game. So originally they were working off a lot of that EU stuff to flesh out those characters, because all of those ships are available in the game, for all of those characters. But, they'd really plumbed the sort of the depths of what was available. And then they did a second edition, and they tried to sort of rebalance the competitive aspect of the game, because there'd been a lot of power creep and a lot of people running squadrons that were just weird, like with sort of 3 nameless bounty hunters in a ship you'd never seen before, and the original ships like the X-Wing and the B-Wing and the TIE Fighter that people loved. The actual 8 TIE Fighters remained competitive, I think, for quite a long time, possibly even right up until the end of the first first edition. But, like the X-Wing and the B-Wing had completely gone. They were just not seen anymore. So then they brought out the new movies and they decided, well, okay, so The Force Awakens, that's going to be okay. We're going to allow that. So we're just going to stay away from the prequels. And so they did a second edition core set, which was the First Order versus the Resistance. And that was from the new movie. And then they also redid all the cards and things, and they didn't put these points values on which you would have used to build up your squad in the first edition, and they had an app that came out with points values that they could adjust, so they could kind of rebalance it on the fly. And that's actually where I kind of dropped out of the game, because at that point I was doing the YouTube channel and I was so busy I just didn't have time to catch up with all the reprinted cards. There were so many, and I bought a bunch of them, but I just never really played it. But I'd also been a playtester on X-Wing actually for a while, and I'd seen a lot of the sort of things that they'd been doing, and they wanted to bring in the Force as well. So in the first edition, the Force didn't exist, but Force users would sort of have their exceptional powers reflected in their ship abilities or their pilot abilities. So if you took Luke Skywalker, he had a really cool power that kind of represented the Force. And then in the second edition, they actually brought in like Force tokens that could be spent to do cool things. And I always thought that was a cool idea. I think I'm allowed to probably talk about this now, but there was a point in playtesting where there was a Force die, an extra die that they would get to throw that had sort of unique elements. That was pretty cool, but it never made it to production. But so I kind of dropped out of the second edition, and now actually, and then Asmodee bought FFG and took all of their miniatures games away and gave them to Atomic Mass, who are a really good miniatures game company. They did Crisis Protocol, which is quite beloved, but they're really good at their own games, and I think all the miniatures games, which was primarily Armada, X-Wing, and Legion, Star Wars Armada and Star Wars Legion, so the 3 Star Wars miniatures games that Asmodee took from FFG and gave to Atomic Mass Games. I don't think they really knew what to do with those, and they didn't have all the experience, and it was a huge amount of content. And so they have been trying to run the competitive scene and release new content, and now there's all the prequel ships as well, and they just decided to produce all of those. Actually, maybe FFG had started doing that already before Atomic Mass got it, I don't know, but I don't have any of that stuff.
Yeah, well, I think there was only like 4 releases last year for X-Wing, so
yeah, I mean, I still play mainly the first edition, and or if I play, I'll do like sort of the second edition, but I've still only got the stuff. I haven't got any of like the really new stuff. So yeah, I mean, I now only really play it, with sort of my friends when they want to humor me, because I'm just massively better than any of them at it, unfortunately.
Yeah, seasons.
I mean, I'm now stuck in kind of a place where it's impossible to play, because I can't really play with my casual friends because I'm too good at it, and I can't play with my competitive friends because I'm not good enough. So I just, it's a real pity, because I really do like the game a lot, and I think it's very clever. And I think it's kind of a shame that there was never I don't know what to recommend to anyone who might be interested in trying it.
Well, a core set is always a place to start, right?
There's not enough in the core set to have a really good game.
2 core sets.
Like, everyone I know who only bought the core set, has been kind of like, yeah, we played it, and I mean, the core set is almost just like a proof of concept. Like, 1 X-Wing versus 2 TIE fighters is so boring, and it's mainly boring because flying just one ship is not that interesting. It just doesn't give you enough tactical options, Like, the X-Wing just flies back and forth. Occasionally it turns, or it might do what's called a K-turn, which is basically a U-turn in space, where it flies straight forward and turns around. That's it, there's just not enough tactical scope, and 2 TIE fighters is not a lot of tactical scope either. So, it's just not enough, so you have to get some other packs. But I would have no idea what to recommend. Well, and I don't know, you'd have to get, anyway.
Whilst it's not the same game, I did play Wings of Glory for the first time last year, and I had a really good time with it.
That has a similar feel. Yeah, Wings of Glory has a similar feel. As does Star Trek Attack Wing, and also Battlestar Galactica, the space miniatures fighting game.
Not played that one, but
Actually, no, that's not true. It's got the same basic framework, but then it's got incredibly complex player dials and it models elevation.
yeah, it was the Dungeons and Dragons and the Star Trek that took over from X-Wing.
Oh god, yeah, D&D Attack Wing. I forgot about that. I mean, I do think X-Wing is light years ahead of both of those games. But I mean, Star Trek was horribly imbalanced, and D&D Attack Wing never took off. I'd be surprised if you could even still buy it.
They had ground troops, didn't they, as well? Yeah, I feel like the dragons were flying around. They had like ground troops as well. I think it was a slightly different system.
Oh, they did have ground troops. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, there was a sort of a ground skirmish fight going on while the dragons flew about over the top using X-Wing rules. Anyway, enough about that. That's my note to the X-Wing miniatures game. I would still happily play it anytime someone was like, please can we play it? And I can balance out the imbalance with my casual friends a bit more easily by giving them some extra points worth of stuff. Or the ships that I know are very simple and OP because they came out late in the cycle.
I had to sell them. Next game then. So this will be the most mainstream, I might argue. Not that my games have been hidden gems by any stretch, but Terra Mystica was the next one I picked, right? Because I am firmly in the Terra Mystica is greater than Gaia project camp, and you'll be hard-pressed to convince me otherwise. Now, I've not played Age of Innovation or Terra Nova. I would give both a go, mainly Age of Innovation, and I don't quite get the same feeling from Clans of Caledonia, though it is often lumped into the mix with the debate between Terra Mystica and Gaia project.
Yeah, I don't think... I mean, I can see why people did that, but I think that they should stop.
Yeah, it's not... It's a very different game, to be honest.
But what I will say is that I'm in the process of releasing a 2023 roundup video on the YouTube channel, and I talk about Age of Innovation in that, because I have played all of those games, Barry, and I give my thoughts on it in that video. So if you do want to know what I have to say about it, subscribe to the YouTube channel.
There you go, good plug. Listen,
Yeah,
if they're
plug.
an hour and a half into the podcast already, I'm sure they'll be in.
We had so many more sections planned that just aren't going to happen.
No, right, this is going on, but who doesn't love to chat about games?
Oh my God.
Terra Mystica, I think it's up there in the Board Game Geek rankings, but if you don't know what it is, it's an area majority network building directed point salad type of game, where you're kind of told what's going to score points in any given round. Players have variable powers based on their faction, and it was designed by Jens Drogmuller and Helga Ostertag, published by Feuerland Spiele. That's all my accented names. Sorry if I butchered any of them. So
flawless. Nobody will notice.
Nah, I'll be fine. It's fluent. They'll be like, I didn't know he was German. And so Terra Mystica was pretty much my first big boy game, right? So I'm aware I've probably got a slight bias towards it. But every game of Terra Mystica I've played, I've loved. Like, I've had a good time with it. And I've never even enjoyed a game of Gaia Project, right? It's been something that I've suffered through to get to the end. So I'm aware I'm kind of in the minority, right? I think Gaia Project's variable tech track is the thing that people often point to it, and the greater variability in the setup versus Terra Mystica's bog standard cult tracks and fixed setup on the maps, but I don't believe that a game is automatically better just because it has more variety, right? I think people like that because it gives them something different to do each game rather than work at improving what they can get out of the same game. But I do understand, time's limited and whatever you find fun is what you should kind of go for. So overall, you've got your faction, you're working at spending your resources to increase your area of influence by putting things down from your player board onto the main board. That opens up additional income options and rewards, and it also, when you're building next to somebody else, moving around this sort of secondary resource of power, which you can then spend on different actions as well. And each turn you're given a target for the round. There's like a different scoring at the end of each round, and you want to be trying to work towards that in order to like get the most out of your turns. You can't ignore them, but the game does have, I would argue, a slightly more a semi-scripted opening, right? People often rush for the temples or the their strongholds to begin to unlock that extra power, almost regardless of what they see on the board. But I think I'm fine with semi-scripted openings, and it does change based on where you've ended up, the player interaction, where they've gone, the map of some of these, and what you're working towards for the end of game scoring or the end of round scoring that time. I'm not as okay with like the degree of scripted opening like chess, right? But I would be fine with something like, have you ever played Nippon?
No, I haven't.
So Nippon's like sort of in the Madeira, Marco Polo kind of area, I'd put it in. And it's got like 4 or 5 scripted openings that you really have to do if you want to do well. And I've only played the game 4 times. I did 4 different openings and I won each of the games. And so I'm happy that it's a perfectly balanced game in all respects. But like if you didn't know about those openings and you did something else, you're going to fall behind almost immediately. And Terra Mystica is one of those games. You have a bad first turn, much like a bad first turn in Food Chain Magnate or something, you're not going to have a good time for the rest of the game. So having also said about the variability elements doesn't necessarily make a better game, maybe a little hypocritical in that I do like the Merchants expansion for Terra Mystica and the sort of variable end of round goals that come through, and with the expansions, the variable final scoring as well that you can get. But I think that's more something you can add in once everybody's comfortable with the base game for that variety, but isn't too complicated that you couldn't add it earlier. So I think that Terra Mystica is a tighter, more aggressive, more competitive game than Gaia Project, and the expansions just can be just as variable with those expansions if you want it to be. So that would be my pick for that one. I will say Gaia Project's also getting the Lost Fleet expansion this year.
Yeah, they announced an expansion for it. That's wild.
So that'll be interesting. I also think the Gaia Project's an uglier game. It is an ugly to the point that it's distracting from playing.
A Gaia Project is surprisingly more complex than Terra Mystica, given that it's the same
game
design roots, and fundamentally the same game in many ways. I've played a fair amount of Gaia Project, and I've played a fair amount of Terra Mystica. I've played Terra Nova twice, and
it's a baby game for babies.
Age of Innovation just once. Well, actually, come watch the video on my channel if you want to know about more.
Only comparatively, right? Like it strips out some of the elements that are in.
Yeah, so as an elevator pitch, Terra Nova strips us down a lot of the complexity of Terra Mystica to make the most accessible version of the game, and Age of Innovation adds a lot more modular randomization to really change up the variety in the game. It also adds a new resource and a new sort of board of upgrades that you can purchase. But fundamentally, what the games have in common in all of the series is that you get the faction board that you're playing as, which has this very influential and powerful ability that you can unlock, which is what Barry was talking about. Most people beeline towards unlocking that, but there are a few other strategies you can do, like going down towards the temples to get those early incomes. So there are some temples, and when you get them, you get these income tokens that will give you income at the top of every round. And the games are all 6 rounds long, and at the end there'll be some end game scoring, but I would say you probably earn 70 or 75% of your points during the game. So that end game score can swing it, and it is important, but there is a round-to-round objective, and you need to be looking at all 6 round-to-round objectives and sort of building a plan around how you're going to meet those, because they're probably your best source of points. Those, and also the concept of towns, and that's where the core player interaction of Terra Mystica and the whole series comes in, right? Because each game is a board that is a series of territories, and each faction likes one kind of territory in the selection of territories on the board, and they're all trying to turn the territories that are not theirs into their territory, and some are much easier to convert than others. So there's this real sort of positional placement game as you start to occupy your territory and start to convert neighboring adjacent territories into your own. And the game gate...
It's been a while since I played Gaia Project. Does Gaia Project have partial terraforming?
No, it does not.
No, you either get it or you don't, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but also I've not known people to do a whole lot of partial terraforming in Terra Mystica, because it's leaves you quite vulnerable if you...
Some end of round bonuses that give you the transformation but not the placement, I think, occasionally when they don't have the resources because you've spent it all during the round. Yeah. But yeah, otherwise not going for it step by step generally.
Yeah, so what Barry's talking about here is effectively you move the style of territory through these transformative steps to get it to what you like. So if you want it to be a swamp and it's a mountain, it has to go from mountain to forest to ocean back to swamp, and then it becomes a swamp. And you can leave it partially terraformed as a forest or ocean, but then if there's someone that likes those, they could come along and steal it from you before you can fully convert it. So it leaves you a bit vulnerable. But what the game does to sort of zhuzh up this whole thing is on your player board, as I mentioned, there are these tiers of buildings, right? You've got those... what are they actually called? Is it called your stronghold? Is that the technical term?
Yes, you got your houses into your trading posts, into your stronghold, or your...
Temple.
Temple into... Well, or is it church into temple, or temple into...
Temple into something. Yeah, so you've got this effectively like tiny tech tree, which has sort of 3 and 5 steps on either side of it, but it funnels all of your upgrades from the settlement, which is the lowest tier, via the second tier, the trade post, into the other 2 areas. And the trade posts are cheaper to build adjacent to other people's buildings, and they're cheaper enough, and the economy is tight enough in the game that is really important. So you want to have some parts of your civilization that are adjacent to other people's civilizations. And then eventually, when you get enough buildings all in one area, they become a town, and you get some points, and you get a bunch of benefits as well. And you want to try to found towns at the right time to get more points. And there's sort of points opportunities coming from all over the board, and you want to be keeping your eyes out for these sorts of opportunities. So it's got that real sort of like Euro-esque point searching feel to it, but at its core it's tight resource management and an element of area control as well, where you want to be keeping your eye on what your opponents are capable of doing. So a very compelling package overall, I think.
Yeah, like I'd always play a game of Terra Mystica. I think it is very interesting, and I enjoy the different factions, and I enjoy I've got all the maps now which don't change that much, but they've done a few clever things for blocking off areas for lower player counts, so you can always get that the tension for the bits that you want.
Yep, absolutely. And the different factions all play quite differently, despite the fact that the differences are quite subtle. The sort of asymmetrical player power that you get to unlock as well is quite interesting. Is it right that each one has a power that they start with that is asymmetrical, and then a second asymmetrical power unlocked by the stronghold?
Yes.
Okay, so you got 2 powers.
It could be subtle. It could just be you get an extra worker for income, or there's a couple of weaker powers, but your stronghold power is maybe a little bit stronger, and that just depends, right? So in those circumstances, you might not rush to your stronghold, or you could have a strong player power where you've got access to shipping straight away, or can go anywhere on the map, different things.
Well, Terra Mystica was on the list. I just realized actually that my list of games I was pitting against each other to get to this point is 69 games. No jokes. But Terra Mystica was on it. I really like Terra Mystica. Gaia Project is also on it, and I think might have come out ahead of Terra Mystica on my list. But
well, you're entitled to your opinion, but you're wrong, and I hate you.
Reasonable. I'm actually surprisingly higher, which is interesting. I don't have super strong feelings about either one over the other, and in fact, out of any of the 4 games in the series, I would quite happily play any of them, to be honest. I really liked them all, and again with Terra Mystica, happy to play with the expansions as well. So I think in many ways, but I guess, if you wanted advice about what to get, I do think Gaia Project is significantly more complex than Terra Mystica. It's hard to explain why. It is, but strategically,
it's a stupid little floaty terraforming platform.
The Gaia platform. Yep, that it could be the Gaia platform. So one of the big elements the Gaia Project adds to the whole thing is the concept of dead spaces. So in Terra Mystica, all the spaces are land, but they are divided up into islands by rivers, and you can develop your shipping to sail up and down the rivers, and that's how you're going to be able to build sort of different towns after the game begins, because you need to put some distance between the buildings you've already built and the ones you are going to be building. In Gaia Project, the spaces are all planets, and they're much more distinct, so it's almost like everything is separated by much bigger rivers, and you have to develop your spacefaring to travel further, and you're going to be building up the concept of towns becomes a lot more sort of amorphous because you have to put out satellites to connect things up. But it also adds the concept of dead spaces, which are wild spaces, so you can turn them into your terrain type directly, but you must develop the technology to access them. So it's kind of a different strategy that or it's a different tech tree, so it's kind of a strategy you have to focus a bit more on to access. So it does have sort of more options, and I do think the board is actually overall quite a bit harder to read if you're not familiar with the concept or the sort of format of the game. I know people that swear Gaia Project is better, and that's because it also takes some distinct elements of Terra Mystica and combines them in a way that feels more elegant and streamlined. But at the end of the day, it actually, even though it might have streamlined certain elements, it is overall much more complex. And then Age of Innovation is kind of a step to the right. Age of Innovation makes everything in Terra Mystica much more modular and really randomizes the setup and also things that happen during the game. So I would suggest that that's probably only for people that are like, we have exhausted all potential combinations of Terra Mystica and are ready for the next thing. And then Terra Nova is the much more accessible one. So if you're like, I like Terra Mystica, but it's too long and too complicated, and some people in my gamer group are not enjoying it because of those reasons, then maybe you can look into Terra Nova. Because it does capture the same, what's the critical part of the series, which is the territory contention aspect on the board. And there we go. Now you don't have to watch my YouTube show.
Yep, you've given it all away.
Damn it! I can't stop being helpful. Moving on. My next one's Cthulhu Wars. I really like Cthulhu Wars, Barry.
I've never played it. You did organise that game, and I couldn't make it. Dudes on a map.
Yeah, it's dudes on a map, and if you've played Chaos in the Old World, Forbidden Stars, or...
Give me one more. I've played both of those.
I'm trying to think of one more. If it comes to me, it'll come to me. So if you've played either of those two games, you'll like Cthulhu Wars. It's just got some key elements I really like. So in Cthulhu Wars, you take on one faction of the old gods, and you are competing to become the best old god, I guess, or the last remaining one. And the way you're going to do this is by achieving peak power. So it's a highly asymmetrical game, and it's got, you know, actually, do you know what? I think that's a bit of misleading. It's got very significantly asymmetrical factions, but they have baseline rules in common. And it is a dudes on a map game. It's a territory control game. You are putting out cultists onto the map first, and they're going to be able to summon more powerful monsters, and eventually you're going to get this giant old one figure onto the board, and it's going to stomp around and be terrifying. But the different old ones all have very different powers. It's played up to a number of points, and points are going to come from holding these important areas of the map called summoning circles, and they're also going to come from winning combats. And when a certain points level is reached, it triggers the end game, and then we check some small end game scoring and announce a winner. There's also a doom track, which can bring about the end of the game, and so every round, in the final phase of the round, players have an opportunity to call in the doom, and that might give them a bunch of extra points, and also moves up the doom track, which can end the game if nobody's achieved 30 points yet. So it's sort of a race with a lot of player agency over the length of the game, and certain factions in the game will increase quite exponentially in power if the game is allowed to go on too long, and other factions want to end it really, really quickly before it gets there. And in order to win the game, you have to have the most points, but you must also qualify to win. So it's not just good enough to have the most points. You have each faction has a board, and the board is going to give you it's going to track a few key bits of information, but the main thing it's tracking are your 6 spell books. Each faction has 6 spell books. There's 6 different powers, and you start with them in a stack, and they're all locked up, so you can't use any of your cool abilities. And you've got these 6 positions on your player board that give you objectives. So they might be things like, you know, control this many summoning circles, kill this many enemies, or, you know, various different kinds of objectives that you want to be doing. Summon your great old one, you know. And then the objectives, once you complete it, you get to unlock one of your spell books, and you put it down there, and you've got a cool new power, which you should announce to the entire table to let them know, because it changes the game, and that's only polite. But if they forget about it after that, that's on them. And you must unlock all 6 spell books to qualify to win. If you don't, then you can't win, even if you have the most points, and that's sad for you. But round to round, you're going to get a series of points, actually kind of reminiscent of the Rage in Blood Rage as well, you know, action points to spend moving people around, bringing them onto the board, etc. Although it doesn't have card drafting or anything, so it's not really like Blood Rage at all. But you've got action points that you're going to spend every round, and you're going to be able to move people around, you're going to be able to put cultists out on the board, they're going to be able to build more summoning circles. If you've got monsters on the board, they can carry off your enemy's cultists, and then you get to steal action points. You get extra action points for capturing enemy cultists, and more importantly, you get them off the board so your cultists can go and stand on the summoning circles. The cultists are the weakest thing. They don't actually fight at all, but you have to work to protect your cultists, because they're the only ones that can stand on the summoning circles, earn points, and also summon monsters. So your army comes from having those guys and keeping them in the most powerful positions, and those summoning circles kind of are like a series of tiny King on the Hill objectives, right? Like everyone wants to be stood on the summoning circle. And one of the things that's really nice about the game is that your units and enemy units can coexist in the same territory. They won't actually start fighting until you spend action points to trigger a battle. So, you know, there's a lot of table talk and a lot of negotiation, and you can say things like, I'm just passing through, I'm going over there to attack that person, or I'm just trying to fulfill my objective to get to the South Pole, you know, don't worry about it, like, it's going to be fine. And then suddenly you realize, like, someone's winning, or they capture one of your cultists, and you're like, that's it, you've enraged me, we're going to war. You know, it's brilliant, I love it. And it's got a real sort of, like, tongue-in-cheek feel as well. Like, there's quite a number of objectives that and I'm thinking specifically of one of the factions that I've totally forgotten the name of, because they're all named after unknowable and indescribable horrors. But there's one ability you get where you basically flip a die. You roll a die, a d6, and then the other players at the table have to give you that many action points collectively from themselves, and then you flip an egg timer and they have a minute to decide who's going to give up the action points, and if they can't decide in a minute, you just win the game. It's really like there's some really silly stuff in there that's just kind of fun and joyful. I really like it. I'd happily play Cthulhu Wars anytime.
Yeah, I definitely want to give it a go. Like, I've never played this. Like, I've got Chaos in the Old World. What was the other game you mentioned? Forbidden Stars.
Forbidden Stars, yeah. Which is famously a reiteration of Chaos in the Old World anyway.
Yeah, definitely want to give it a go. It goes up to 8 players with the expansions.
Oh, it goes up to 11 players, Barry, if you have all the
Is it 11 players? I presume the map gets a bit bigger.
Yeah, actually, you can only play at 11 players if you have the special neoprene mat that allows that.
Right, okay. No, it looks interesting. I definitely give it a go.
I've played it at 4, 5, and 7. I've played it at 4 a number of times. I've played it at 5 a number of times. And then I've played it once at 7. And actually, it hung in there at 7. Like, I'd happily play it 7 again. I'd happily play at a higher player count, but it does get longer.
Ridiculous.
The more people are involved. Yeah, it does get pretty ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't get, like... I mean, I think if people were really across the game, you could actually play it pretty quickly, even at those high counts. But... you know, the main thing is you have to keep adding in more of these asymmetrical factions, and they're asymmetrical in the sense that their old one powers are all different, their 6 unlockable spell books are all different, everyone starts with a power that's different, and they all have really quite different strategies and sort of ways that you can stop them or work against them and things like that. You know, like functionally Cthulhu, his old god is super powerful and you want to be getting him out as quickly as possible and chucking him into battle, and you don't really care if he dies, he's just going to reappear, and he's dirt cheap to bring back to life if he's been killed. Whereas like other factions are much more like sort of like I think it's Shub-Niggurath, I can't remember, it's the Black Goat, is that Shub-Niggurath? Yeah. Black Goat of the Woods? Yeah, so that faction's like really like hard to kill, but they're really expensive and slow, and they just build up over time, and then they're hard to sort of get out of territories once they're there. So they're just like a creeping fungus, you know. I think it calls them that in the strategy in the book. Like, the book gives you some basic strategy tips on how to play a faction and how to defeat it. And so, you know, if you've got people at the table that haven't played before, you kind of have to take them through all of that. So there's quite a big upfront price of entry, but actually a lot of it is front loaded, and then once you start the game it's just going, and there's nothing new that's revealed. And because there's no cards or anything, the only rules you'll be looking up is like, how do I defeat this thing again? Like, you know, the rules are very clear, and that's really nice. It's not a game of rules ambiguities that constantly need to be checked or anything. Right. It's relatively simple, really. It's just that the asymmetry and the rules take quite a lot to look up front. But yeah, I mean, it is also very expensive to buy because the models are massive, and and also it's designed by Sandy Peterson of Peterson Games, and they did, I think, 3 print runs of Cthulhu Wars, 1 print run of Glorantha. They released a few straight to retail things like Cthulhu Wars Jewel, and then which is actually surprisingly good, by the way. And then they went they sort of ran out of money with a bunch of pending Kickstarters, and they've hung in there. They haven't declared bankruptcy or anything, but they have now partnered up with another company who's going to help them deliver their outstanding Kickstarters.
Right. Frequently happening these days.
Yeah, and if those ever appear, it would be great, but we don't know if they will. Hopefully they will. Hopefully, because I like their games. I like Glorantha as well. I really wanted to get the rest of them. It's not just because I'm a backer and I'm worried about losing my money. I actually do like Cthulhu Wars a lot, and I like Glorantha as well, and I even like Cthulhu Wars Jewel. And by the way, for the sake of full transparency, I bought all my own Cthulhu Wars stuff, but I did get some review copies of Cthulhu Wars Jewel.
All right, disclaimer done.
But yeah, so that's Cthulhu Wars anyway. disclaimer done, it's expensive, but I think if you get the opportunity to play it, definitely give it a try. I think you'll probably like it if you like anything like, any of those fun Eric Lang designs like, Chaos in the Old World or Blood Rage or stuff like that.
Nice. All right, one more. And then we'll be done. People will know what we like.
Yeah, we'll call this an episode, and the podcast will start proper from episode 2.
Yeah, we'll talk more about games we've been playing and everything else, but this is, I'd argue this is useful for people to know kind of what we like. So my final game for this bit is Android Netrunner, right? Couldn't really not be. So Netrunner is my only
I had a feeling
10 out of 10 game on Board Game Geek, right? Nothing else. I don't think I've got anything else above a 9 anymore, because when Netrunner is good, it is sublime. Like, it's just such a good game. So Netrunner was Fantasy Flight's re-implementation of Richard Garfield's 1996 Netrunner CCG. It was picked up by Lucas Litzinger at Fantasy Flight Games, who developed it, modernised it, added elements to it to make it more balanced, make the deck building more interesting, but then unfortunately killed off in a licensing deal that we don't know the details of, and only now kept alive by the fan project Null Signal Games. So it's still going, and people are still making new cards for it, but they are fan run rather than any sort of proper organised play. That said, there will be a 2024 Netrunner regional in the UK this year, so I may make a deck and go and play. For people that don't know what Netrunner is, which might be a lot of people at this point, it's an asymmetric constructed deck card game for 2 players, or generally 2 players. There was that one weird expansion. One player takes the role of the Netrunner, right, the hacker, in this cyberpunk Android universe, and the other player plays a corporation looking to protect and advance their shady secrets, right? So it's all wrapped in this cyberpunk theme. The original was Cyberpunk 2077, and then FFG brought it to their Android IP. In the game, it's a card-driven game, pre-constructed decks, as I say, or you have to construct your deck before you play. The Netrunner builds up their board of programs and connections to help them access these corporation servers, while the corporation deploys intrusion countermeasure electronics, right, which is just a bit of a backronym for ICE, to keep the runner out, whilst also developing their own agendas. It's played to 7 points, and all the points are in the corporation's deck. So the Netrunner has to get into the corporation's hand, their deck, their servers, that they put out onto the field of play, and the corporation has to take them from their hand and deck and play them out and risk them being stolen in order to get the points to finish the game. So the game itself is played with a mix of sort of like action points, hand and deck management. The economy game in this is the crux of it, right? The money game, the how are you getting into those servers, the how are you advancing your agendas and still being able to pay to keep the runner out is the core part of it, really. It's got a liberal dose of bluffing. It produces a tense back and forth where getting ahead in points by scoring or stealing this agenda typically means giving up a little on the economy front, making you weaker, which will give the opponent an opportunity to build back up and catch up or get ahead. And when you're playing Netrunner with fair decks and players of comparable skill, there's really nothing like it. It was my favourite game. I played competitively. Wasn't particularly good at it, but I was okay. But for years, whilst the competitive scene was supported, went to tournaments all around the country, never went to Worlds. But whilst I've picked this as my top card game. It's worth noting I also play a lot of card games and other competitive card games, particularly both in real life and digitally. I find card games to be one of the most, or cards to be one of the most flexible mediums for a game, allowing a lot of big brain moves and variety of experiences, as well as personalisation and just a lot of fun to be had from 50, 60 cards in your hand and a few tokens often. But yeah, Netrunner, I can't imagine what game would dethrone that from my 10 out of 10. I'm doing a living card game, dead living card game session next month, and Netrunner will get played. We'll do a sort of mini tournament, and it'll be good fun to bust out the old decks and see how they go.
I mean, in many ways, Netrunner was so good that it was the reason why FFG created all those other living card games, because there were obviously two distinct categories. There was like the cooperative adventure ones, which was primarily Lord of the Rings and Arkham Horror, and then there was the competitive ones. But
well, they couldn't really support the competitive ones, so I dispute your thinking there. So FFG took over the Call of Cthulhu CCG and turned it into an LCG, right? So instead of buying blind packs, you got fixed distribution packs. Then
okay, so they sort of had this habit of buying up old CCGs and redeveloping them.
Same with the first edition Game of Thrones. That used to be a CCG until they went to LCG, and then they had their cooperative one, like you're saying, Lord of the Rings. But then they produced. There was Netrunner, there was Conquest, Invasion as well. So they had the Games Workshop affiliation as well. So they had Warhammer Invasion.
Yeah.
They had Warhammer Conquest, Netrunner, and was there one more in that mix? What have I got? Oh, L5R eventually. Yeah,
they had L5R, and they also had the Game of Thrones one.
Yeah, so and then the Game of Thrones second edition, as well as Arkham Horror as a second cooperative game. And so yeah, like thinking about it there, actually, yeah, the FFG seemed to go into these old CCGs and remake them as a fixed distribution in their living card game model, which didn't seem to work so much for competitive to support. It didn't really work for
anything else the way it worked for Android Netrunner.
Well, even that, I don't know how well Android Netrunner sold. I think it was fine, but they killed off all their competitive games and hardly supported the play to the degree that the game deserved.
They were supporting Netrunner until they lost the license. Like, that was the only one that they didn't kill.
Yeah, well, they were... yes.
Well, that and Conquest, actually. I think they lost the Warhammer license as well.
They did, yeah.
But I thought Android Netrunner was like the earliest of their LCGs. Is that not right?
No. I mean, like I said, Call of Cthulhu was the first one, if not Game of Thrones. I think it was Call of Cthulhu, then Game of Thrones, first edition, which was a very different game to second edition. Then Warhammer Invasion, then Netrunner.
There you go, a history lesson in the FFG LCGs for you as well, which is the Fantasy Flight Games living card games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had some Netrunner back when it came out. I had the core set and some rather random packs, and I just played it incredibly casually, but I really, really, really liked it.
Scrub. Get good.
Well, the thing is, I'm never going to be into the competitive scene for those games because I don't like deck construction. I could just about do squad construction for X-Wing, where I have to pick like some ships and like up to 10 cards, but anything more than that, like build a whole deck of cards, like 40 cards or 60 cards, I'm like, oh no, this feels like homework. I can't do it. I don't like it. So, my experience was always Googling decks, and finding like the ones where someone's written like a little strategy guide, so we'll find one cool deck. So like we'll pick a faction, you know, me and my buddy will each pick a runner and a corp, and then we'll look up some like cool decks that you can make with the cards we've got, and then you know, we'll look for ones that have strategy guides, so we have some vague idea about what we're supposed to be doing, and then you know, we'll just play that. And I've had great times doing that, like really, really good times.
Yeah, I'm not against net decking for whatever reason. I'd still do it for.
Well, you know, otherwise we'd be there for so long, Barry. We don't know the card pools, we don't know the strategies, we don't know like anything, you know. So it's what we would never like, you know, we'd be sitting there sort of pulling cards apart. And also, I think like the thing is as well, in the spirit of our sort of approach to it, you couldn't really have that competitive experience of like, you know, tweaking a deck, you know, like, oh, you know, I'm really good in most matchups, but this is my weak point matchup, so I'm going to take these cards out and put these cards in, because that gives me like a sort of a surprise edge in that particular match. Like, because we never played the same decks more than a few times, you know, or occasionally we'd be like, oh, bring that deck out, I want to see how it does against this other deck, you know. But because we had no real concept of sort of what was good against particular things or bad against particular things, you know, it was always a bit of a lottery and tweaking, you know. I mean, if like, I do remember a few times actually where someone would be like, oh, it's never me, because this is just not what I do in these games, but I just don't have the mind for it. But someone would be like, oh, you know, especially if they got sort of, if they lost by a margin, they'd be like, oh, can I try it again, but maybe I'll swap out a few cards. I'd be like, yeah, you know, that's completely fine. Of course, you know, that's a fun thing to do, but only if it's quick, you know. I don't want to be sitting here for hours while you build a deck, because I don't want to do that. And also, I'm just going to randomly change what I'm playing anyway, so you can spend an hour building a deck and then you don't know what you're playing against.
You pull out a different deck, yeah.
Well, it requires a bit of a baseline meta, doesn't it, for you to sort of start getting into the idea of matchups and competitive play. Yeah,
and that could be said for a lot of competitive card games, so... But learning the meta and doing stuff like I did the podcast, I did Face Check, right? The podcast for Netrunner. I liked it that much and got a couple of dozen episodes in or whatever.
Now, Face Check is a Netrunner term for when a runner flips a piece of ice face up to see what it is.
Best way of finding it.
That's what I say. I knew that.
Good work.
I'd like a brownie point, please. But I actually sold off my FFG Netrunner cards because I didn't have very many. But I've since bought almost all the Null Signal stuff, and I still play casually with friends. I like it. I have great times playing Netrunner. It is a fantastic game.
What's your last one?
My last game on the list is Guards of Atlantis 2. This is also, I mean, I guess Guards of Atlantis 1. 2 is, you know, a refinement, but it's basically the same game. And this is a team-based skirmish game. It is pretty niche and pretty weird. It is by a designer called Artyom Nichipurov, who runs the company Wolf Designer. I once covered the prototype for Guards of Atlantis 2. I did not, and that was during the pandemic. I made a rules video, but I was not paid, so I was never sponsored to cover Wolf Designer stuff in any way. And I really, really like this game a lot. It is a team-based skirmish game, so it shines really at 4 and 6 players. It is probably about a 90-minute game, and it is simulating the concept of MOBAs. So if you don't know, MOBAs are video games that are mobile something arena. I don't even like MOBAs, really.
Multiplayer online battle arena.
Thanks, Barry.
Anytime.
I mean, I remember, I'm so old, I played the original MOBA when it was a Warcraft 3 mod. But they've since taken off, and of course League of Legends is the really big popular one, or at least it was. Maybe it's something else now. I don't keep up with that.
Dota, maybe a bit of Smite.
Dota is the original. Yeah, that was originally the mod, and now it's its own thing. But if I don't want to talk about those games anyway. But if you know those games, you have a head start in what this game's about, sort of. But really, the game is about this ancient war that's taking place on the Isle of Atlantis between these mechanical creatures and these crystal creatures, and they are sort of constructs of the ancient Atlanteans, and they've left behind these two big factories that are just spewing out these creatures, and they're just running into the middle of this battlefield and fighting. And it is believed that if one side can win the conflict, great treasure will be revealed to the allies of that side. So you represent these sort of heroic treasure hunters that have come from other parts of this fantasy land to this weird ancient island to try and bring victory to one side of this conflict so that you can claim the treasure that will be revealed. And the fantasy characters that you'll be playing as are all very, very weird and distinct. So it's got that sort of like super fantasy brawl vibe or unmatched vibe, I guess, where, you know, you pick one of these bizarre characters. And the game takes place over a series of rounds that will end when either a team runs out of lives, so you have a collective pool of lives, and every time one of your hero characters is killed, you lose one or more lives, and when that pool is depleted, the other side wins. Or if the side that you're on, whether it's the mechanisms or the crystal creatures, is able to push all the way back to that factory on the other side that's spewing out these creatures. If it pushes into the factory, your side wins as well. And so in a game, you start in your factory areas, and you run out onto the board, and then you move down to where the creatures are fighting, and you either start picking off the creatures on the other side, which will give you a small amount of points, or you can try to kill an enemy hero, which is very difficult, particularly at the start of the game. But that will get you more points. And at the end of the round, the points will be spent to level up your heroes and gain access to new things. So each hero has a collection of action cards that they're going to be using, and you have 5 cards in your hand. I think it's 5. Pretty sure it's 5. There's a sort of a silver ability and a gold ability, and these are your sort of core powers that you'll use over and over again. And then there's a red, green, and blue ability, and those can be upgraded using these points that you earn over the course of the game. So what you do in a round is you will program these cards onto your player board, and each player board is made of 4 spaces to accommodate the cards. So a round is playing through all 4 spaces, and a turn is each player playing 1 card from their hand into the space of the current turn. So 4 turns, and that's the end of the round. And as you proceed through the round, you'll be thinking harder about which cards you want to keep in hand and which cards you want to play down now for their ability. And once everyone has played a card face down onto their player board, all the cards are flipped up, and then the initiative values of the cards are checked, and then actions are carried out in descending initiative order. And of course, the heroes are highly asymmetrical. The abilities are all very different, and initiative is part of this asymmetry. So some characters are very slow, some are very fast. But characters will activate in that order, and when they trigger their card, they can either do a sort of a basic maneuver or a basic attack, depending on what's on the card, or they can use the special power printed on the card, provided they meet the conditions. So everyone will resolve their card in the initiative order, and then everyone will flip over the second card and the third card. When all the cards are resolved, you will pick your hand back up. There'll be this sort of conflict on the board. Whoever has got more guys on their side in the battlefield will kill some more guys on the enemy side to represent these forces sort of fighting in the background. And then you'll proceed to the next round, unless the other side is entirely dead. And then you push the territory towards the opponent's factory, so you get a bit closer. And the opponents will have to work harder to push you back into the middle so you don't get into their factory. What's particularly unique about this game is that the heroes are, well, they're all very distinct, but the team aspect comes with all the... So it's hard to know where to start with this game, but it's a skirmish game. It's a head-to-head game, albeit with teams, and it's got this card play and these hero abilities, and it's super duper tight. Like, all the cards are exceptionally well written. It's one of those games where, and Artyom Nichipurov is actually really good at this in all of his games, where you go to BGG and you post a query about the card and you're like, can this really work like this? You know, this is what it says on the card. And every time the answer is just, yes, that's exactly how it works. So the card text is exceptionally well written. The cards they have some iconography, but they're very clear and very precise. So you've got this incredible precision to the game that makes it feel like quite a tactical game of chess, right? Rather than, a sort of a loose game or a bloated Kickstarter or something that feels poorly developed. It's very tight and very thought through. And the second edition, really brings home just how precise it is. And then, but, you're sort of like, well, where's the wrinkle, right? You've got this tight game of chess. The wrinkle is the communication, because during the programming step, you can talk to your opponent, your teammate, about your cards and your abilities and what you're intending to do. You can't explicitly say which card you're playing. And again, the communication rules, the restrictions are very, very clear about what you can and can't say in the rulebook. But you can effectively tell your opponent, sort of your teammate, you can't tell them what card you're playing, but you can tell them what you intend to do. But the more information you communicate, it's all open, and then the opponents will listen and they will know what you're doing and they might plan for that. So you have to sort of be a bit cagey about what you reveal to your teammate, but then your teammate needs to work in tandem with you, because really it's very difficult for a hero to win a one-on-one combat with another hero. Like, you kind of have to gang up to kill an opponent's hero. So it's really like cagey. And then once the programming is done and the cards are being resolved, on your turn while you're resolving your card, no communication. You cannot ask your teammate for strategic advice at all. So you kind of just have to intuit what you think the strategy is and then make these decisions based on what you think you're doing. And you can look at their board and see what card they've played. So there's this real sort of like interesting wrinkles. It feels like a really high skill game where all the information is known and deterministic, but where human error is incredibly is like so possible and prevalent. And every time I play it, I'm just like, how did I not know that? I could have done better. How did I not guess that this was what was going to happen? I totally misread that situation. And the way the hit points of the heroes work is also really, really good, because it's just the cards in the hand. So every time you hit your opponent, they have to discard a card from their hand, and if they cannot, they die. And actually, they have to. It's not strictly true. Your attack will have a numeric value, and they have to discard cards from their hand. A card from their hand that reaches that numerical value. All the cards have defense values, and if they can't, they die. So if you wail on an opponent's character, they also become more vulnerable, because they actually may not be able to play. Characters are very vulnerable in the final round, because if they've already been hit once, they'll have no cards left in hand. So if they're hit again, they will just die. So there is this sort of like tension of death, but you do have to kind of plan around it. And certain characters have really cool like defensive powers, and again, that's where the human error comes in. Like, you'll hit someone, they'll play some card and it'll deflect your attack back at you, or something like that, and you're like, God, how was I to know that? That's so annoying. And then you'll do it again and you'll be like, how did I forget that they could do that? That's so annoying. But, again, like all of this stuff sort of, you'll see pretty much everyone's ability the first round of the game. So the first round of the game, you've seen basically everything that's going to happen in the game. And then you get these points for killing the enemies and killing the creatures. And so you'll spend those to upgrade your abilities. And every time you upgrade a card, you get 2 new cards in the next tier. And you swap your current card out for one of those. And it's a very similar ability, so like maybe in the guy with the defensive card, maybe it was, block your opponent's attack, it does no damage, like a super dodge, and then in the next tier, it's going to be block your opponent's attack and do some damage back to them, or block their attack and move a space or something, and you decide which one you want to take based on the sort of the strategy you're developing. So you get to do a little bit of sort of action upgrading in real time based on how the game is going. And there's this nice sort of catch-up mechanism as well, where when you kill an enemy hero, their team loses lives equal to that hero's level. So the more of these upgraded cards they get, the higher their level is, and then they're going to become much more juicy targets, and it becomes a lot more tense. So it's just a really sort of intriguing, precise skirmish game, and all the characters feel well balanced, and they go way up in complexity as well. Like, you've got these sort of recommended 1-star starting characters, and it goes all the way up to 5-star characters with these huge skill curves. And so there's this huge sort of scope for getting better at the game. And it's not just about learning the characters and their abilities, but it's also about sort of being able to read the board state and pay attention to things and understand what's going on. And I have such a good time every time I play it, even though I always lose and I'm really bad at it.
Yeah, I mean, it all sounds pretty good. I've never played. You've gone on about it before and said how good it was, so definitely be up for it.
Yeah, and it's always like 90 minutes,
quick as well.
Or it's like 60 to 90 minutes, and there is a tome of mastery that introduces a number of modular extra bits and things like that, sort of advanced gameplay concepts. I've never looked at it, don't need it yet. I'm not there. I may never get there, and I'd actually probably be completely fine with never getting there.
Well, again, a game that you can get better with as a group, right? So, or add different things in as a group. It seems like it would reward repeated plays and people learning those cards. The only thing I don't like from what you've described is just looking at the rules for table talk. I get kind of the second half of the rule where once you've put your cards down and once you've flipped the card, resolve in order. You can't talk about what you want to do, really. But not allowed to tell people what cards you're going to play beforehand, but it says you may read out information from your cards. And if you know the decks well enough, then you know what card they're going to play. And so I find that those rules are just pointless.
Do you know what I think it is? I think it's actually for people that don't know the cards, because if you read out the text of the card, you're effectively describing what it does. But if you've got a team that know all the cards and a team that don't, and you're like, I'm playing Jump About. The other team have no idea what that does.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You could also say, it doesn't say you have to read out all the information from your card if you're discussing a card. So if I just said, jump 2, and you would know, well, I know that you've only got the single jump card that moves you those 2 spaces and does something.
Yeah, but jump 2 gives you, you might know that. So, that's a little bit of a nuance.
Yeah.
You might then know what the next part of that is, and I don't. But that's also, I suppose, only going to help in the first round, because the minute you play that card, everyone knows what it does.
Cool.
But I mean, I do find that in practice, this has always felt incredibly tight and precise, and never fuzzy. It's not like Gloomhaven,
Yeah, I'm gonna go early this round.
I'm quite fast.
Yeah.
I mean, we always try to play in the spirit of the rules for Gloomhaven, but I think if you watch me and Chris's Jaws of the Lion playthrough on the channel, you'll see that as we get towards the end of the scenarios, when things are getting increasingly desperate, it's like, I think we get less and less. We honor that less and less, and it's not conscious. It's just because we're feeling tenser and tenser, and the communication rules for Gloomhaven are pretty fuzzy, and so I'm quite conscious of fuzzy communications rules. And I found that whenever we've been playing this, and someone's like, "Can I say, what can I say? Can I say this?" I've always been able to find a sort of a clarification in the rules, or I've been able to read out exactly what the rules say, and that's cleared it up.
Mm-hmm. The rulebook's super short and it looks straightforward, so it looks pretty clear. Yeah,
a lot of the game's complexity. I mean, there's quite a lot in the Tome of Mastery, but the game's complexity really comes from the different characters and what they do and how they can develop,
Sounds cool.
I would happily play Guards of Atlantis 2 anytime anyone asked. But again, it's got to be... I mean, there are rules for 3 players, and there are rules for 5 players, but in a 3-player game, one person's controlling 2 characters, and then they just have to use these... There are these handicap cards, which are slightly less good versions of the silver or gold ability, so it's just slightly nerfed, and they just say that to reflect the fact that the person who's on their own doesn't have communication restrictions, they have to swap in one of these they have to swap in a handicap card to each hero. So you can do it, but I just think it's kind of missing the point. The communication restrictions are a huge part of it, right? And I guess that's one of the things I would say about the game, because it does feel like a very precise and confrontational game. The sting of human error or missing something can make you feel like, oh God, I've let my teammate down, I've blown it, what a bummer. Now I revel in that sort of stuff. I think it's human error and mistakes that make games interesting. play fast and make mistakes, I think, is that's an adage.
Yeah, your philosophy.
That's not my philosophy. I definitely heard that somewhere. But we also say a good game's a fast game, a good game's a close game, Mm-hmm. So play fast and make mistakes and, have a good time.
Play more. There, we can definitely get a slogan. We can definitely get some slogans on a t-shirt after this.
Yeah. But if you're the kind of person that feels, it suffers from sort of AP or, doesn't like the sort of the pressure of having to sort of play well on your own, or someone relying on you to do something and you can't communicate about it, that this is going to definitely trigger you,
To be aware.
So just a heads up. Yeah, it's a super niche game, but it just scratches a lot of my itches, I guess.
But not the ones you need the cream for. Right, let's wrap this one up then, I guess, because who's going to listen to 2.5 hours of us chatting here?
I don't know. But if you have listened to this podcast, thank you so much for listening. This has been a special bumper episode. All future episodes will be a lot shorter and a lot more focused. We just really wanted to talk about some games that we really, really love, to give you some idea about sort of what kind of gamers we are and where we've been coming from, and an introduction to us as well. Moving forward from next episode, we'll be doing reviews of games that we've been playing. Not always contemporary stuff. There'll be contemporary stuff in there, but it could be anything really that we've been playing and we want to share with you guys as well. So I hope you'll subscribe to the feed or subscribe to wherever you found this, and that you'll be excited to come and join us for these board game discussions as we move forward.
All right. Till next time.
Do we have a sign-off?
Don't know.
A sign-off for the podcast?
Play, love, laugh. I don't know. What's... love, play, eat. I don't know.
Till next time, ready, steady, play.
And there we go.
Oh, God, shoot me.